Hello everyone, and welcome to a new part of What If Doomslayer was in Highschool DxD. If you enjoy the video, please like, subscribe and share the video. It really motivates me to make more. I did not write this story. The writer is Wacko12, please support them. Now let's dive in. So, why exactly did you want to see me? Flynn asked. The Doomslayer was sitting on a chair in the front yard of Rias' vacation house in the outskirt of Kuo. He had his legs resting on the table, not giving a damn about mannerism. After coming back from Kuo and dealing with a happy Kuroka smothering his face with her assets, Tiamat had told him what had happened. How Rias wanted to speak with him about what had happened at the clubroom. Normally, Flynn wouldn't have cared, but concerned if more demons were coming after seeing so many whores back then, Flynn decided to find out. That is how Flynn, along with Tiamat and Kuroka in her cat form, were now meeting with Rias Gremory. Also present were Kaneko, whose lap Kuroka was currently resting on, Akino, who had brought out tea and snacks that neither Flynn or Tiamat were touching, and Kiba, who was staying vigil. Issei was in the background, deeply bruised after his training session with Kaneko, where said girl threw rocks at him, and was currently being healed by Asia. I suppose I should explain from the beginning. Rias said with a tone of seriousness. You recall the blonde devil from before? You mean the one whose face I blew off and then regenerated? Flynn asked rhetorically. What about him? Rias sighed. His name is Riser Phoenix, the third son of the Phoenix family. I'm also engaged to him in a political marriage. I don't think I have to explain why I absolutely refuse to marry him. Flynn raised an eyebrow. Both Mephisto and Tiamat had explained to him that sometimes devils arrange political marriages in order to strengthen bonds between pillars as well as keeping pureblood devils alive. It had happened sometimes with his people but was rare. And though he only seen him briefly, Flynn could understand why Rias did not want to marry Riser. Taking Flynn's silence as a sign to continue, Rias said, due to my constant refusal to marry Riser, my family and the Phoenix clan have made the decision that a rating game would decide if my engagement would continue or not. Rating game? Flynn asked, looking at Tiamat. It's a competition between devils and their peerages. Normally it is used for entertainment and other times to increase one's social standing in the underworld. Tiamat explained. And you want me to participate? Flynn asked, a hopeful tone in his voice. A small sinister smile formed on his lips. The idea of legally tearing apart demons sounded very appealing. The devils noticed this and shivered at the bloodlust radiating off him. Unfortunately, Rias shot down that. I'm afraid that's not possible. Unless approved of by both sides, outsiders cannot join rating games. And seeing how this is a special event and you're an outsider, I don't think the families will allow it. No, what I'm actually asking is for you to train us. Flynn frowned, both at the fact he could not participate and what the Gremory girl was asking. Train you? Why would you want that? Furthermore, why would I even agree? Rias sighed. Because you are the strongest person we know. From the past stray hunts, I have seen that, despite your brutality, you are a skilled fighter, more than any of us put together. With that knowledge, we could improve ourselves and have a better chance of defeating Riser. Well, it is true I am stronger than all of you put together. Flynn said, ignoring the glares from the others. However, you didn't say what was in it for me. If you help me, I would be in your debt. As the heiress of the Gremory clan and the younger sister of the current Lucifer, it would be in my power to give you almost anything you want. Rias said honestly. She knew that usual tactics like seduction would not work on Flynn. Not when it was obvious that he held a strong dislike towards devils. She would have to use connections and resources to get his help. Vega spoke up, communicating with Flynn privately. Assisting the Gremory may be advantageous for us, Doomslayer. Not only would we have another source to requisition from, but we can gain better insight on the devils in the event we must face them, the AI reason. To be honest, Flynn didn't like the idea of helping these devils at all. But Vega did make a good point that it would be better than relying just on Mephisto for materials and money. And when the time came to wipe out the devils, Flynn would know everything he needed to know to face them. Fine, I'll help train you. He saw the devils with relieved looks on their faces. First, show me how you guys are working on getting stronger. 2 hours later. I'll say it from the ass, you guys suck. Those were the words Flynn said as he, the Gremory peerage, Tiamat and Kuroka gathered in the living room. He had watched the training regimen the devils were following, what they were trying to improve on and the strategies they were devising for the rating game. Needless to say, Flynn was not impressed. Even Night Sentinel recruits showed more promise than them. Screw beating that brat. You guys would be lucky to last half an hour against him and his whores. Flynn said. Issei frowned. Hey, what's that supposed to mean? He demanded, not happy that his senior was dissing them and Bucho. Flynn sighed. Shut up and listen. Vega, explain it. He told the AI, who currently had his drone form out. Very well. What Flynn is referring to is your training and current condition. There are many flaws in your plans and how you are trying to become stronger. First off is Rias Gremory, your focus solely on power of destruction. However, your power and speed are low that it is possible for opponents with abilities to protect themselves or immense durability to resist your attacks, or with incredible speed to dodge them. Thus, leaving yourself open for an attack up close, which is fatal given how you lack melee skills. Plus, your tactical skills are also lacking, including putting it into training. Having Hayadu learn swordsmanship in just 2 weeks, when he would be more fitted as a brawler, is quite unwise, Vega said to the Gremory heiress. The redhead wanted to retort, but knew he was right. Next was Aquino. According to my understanding, the queen piece enables one to gain the traits of the bishop, knight and rook. In your case, you depend solely on the bishop's increased magic, and not speed, strength and defense. Not only does this make you unqualified to contend with fast-moving or strong opponents, should you run out of energy or your magic is sealed, you are useless. Aquino said nothing, not even her usual giggle. After her was Kiba. Your speed is impressive, but that is all you have. You possess no sword techniques besides the basics, instead relying solely on your speed. Plus, you lack stamina, meaning prolonged fights are not your forte. There is also the case with your durability, which is basically non-existent. Kiba frowned at that analysis but couldn't say anything in his defense. Vega looked at Kaneko. Your problem is the opposite of his. Your defense and strength are average at best to the standard of devils. However, you possess no range attacks, thus making you weak against long-range opponents, and your speed is too low. Furthermore, if you face against individuals who also depend on strength and durability, the chances of you winning are 50% at best. Kaneko frowned and looked down. Asia got her lecture. Seeing your personality and sacred gear, it would be ill-advised for you to learn any offensive techniques. However, your stamina is low, thus making it difficult for you to heal multiple people at once, along with the fact you must be next to them to initiate twilight healing. Plus, you have no defensive abilities or spells to protect yourself, thus making you more of a burden to the others. Asia seemed rather upset by the analysis, her eyes a bit watery, but Flynn and Vega ignored it. Lastly was Issei. Vega's drone eye just stared at him for a minute before saying. As for Hayadu, less said the better. Issei's head dropped in shame, a depressed aura over his head. Fortunately, I have worked out a training regimen for you all. Flynn shall take Hayadu, Kiba and Tuju. Meanwhile Tiamat will train Gremory, Himejima and Argento, Vega stated. Tiamat? Rias murmured the name. Her eyes widened as she finally realized the blue-haired woman's identity. Wait. Tiamat, as in Chaos Karma Dragon Tiamat? The strongest Dragon King? That Tiamat? She's your familiar? Those who knew what Rias was talking about were also shocked. Yeah, so? Flynn asked, not the least bit bothered. Just the heads up, I am going to be completely brutal in your training, to the point it might even kill you, leave you on death's door if you're lucky. Same with Tiamat. Still want me to train you? The Doom Slayer was radiating bloodlust that was freaking out everyone except for Kuroka and Tiamat. However, the peerage of Rias Gremory were determined to free their king from this forced engagement, even if that meant putting themselves at Flynn's mercy. We accept, they all said. 10 days before raiding game. Oh shit. Issei cursed as he dodged another explosion. Another projectile came fly through and would have hit the pervert, if Kaneko hadn't thrown a boulder at the projectile, destroying both in another explosion. Thanks, Kaneko-chan. Move it, pervert. Was all the girl had to say as more grenades came flying towards them. The two devils ran as they avoided the projectiles. What they and Kiba were doing was a practice exercise that Flynn had developed. The Doom Slayer would fire rockets and/or grenades at them, forcing the devils to run for their lives while trying to reach him. This was to improve Kaneko's speed and reflexes, Kiba's durability and stamina, and all four for Issei. It was also so that they could develop better reaction times for traps and ambushes. It had been an hour and so far, the trio had managed to avoid taking direct hits, though were covered in dust and bruises with their training clothes partially destroyed. Flynn was from an elevated position, a small hill overlooking the forest, firing his weapons without mercy. The young devils have had no luck getting to the Doomslayer. Even with the dense cluster of trees covering them, Flynn was somehow able to figure out their location, giving them zero chances to catch their breath. While Flynn reloaded his rocket launcher, he looked at Kuroka. Said woman was in his nekasha form and resting on her stomach and elbows as her hands held her head. Using senjutsu, she was acting as his eyes in locating the three devils. So, when were you going to tell me that the white one was your sister? Flynn suddenly asked. The question was so sudden that Kuroka could only say, Naya? In response. The white-haired girl? Kaneko, right? She's your sister. Flynn said. Kuroka was still surprised that the Doomslayer figured out the connection. She then laughed nervously. Naya ha, was it that obvious? Flynn rolled his eyes as he fired another volley. When you took my keys, it was so you could use my aura to hide yours while you snuggled on that girl's lap. And there were all those other times whenever she was around, you tried to be near her as much as you could, plus, Vega did a scan and noted that your DNAs matched above 50%. Kuroka blinked, not realizing the obvious clues. So, mind telling me why you two are in two completely different positions? Flynn asked. Seeing how she could not get out of this, Kuroka began her tale. After our parents died, Chiron and I were taken in by a member of the Nabirius clan and I was reincarnated into his bishop, Naya. During the time, I became extremely talented in senjutsu and yujitsu, and with the bishop pieces, my magical powers surpassed my former king, Naya. Because of that, everyone assumed that I became drunk with powers and killed my king, Naya. You don't seem insane. Though I'm not sure if I call your attempts to sleep with me sane. Flynn commented. That's because I find you sexy, Naya. Kuroka laughed. Flynn raised an eyebrow at the joke, but said nothing, waiting for her to continue her story. The true reason as to why I killed him was to protect my Chiron, Naya. The man wanted to conduct tests on her in his research of creating a super devil, Naya. Super devil? Flynn asked, finding the name ridiculous. It is a name regarded for devils whose powers surpass that of Satan class. So far, there are only 3 known devils who hold said position, 2 of whom are demon kings, Vega said. Yeah, and because of that my sister was nearly executed until she was taken in as the Gremorese Rook. It looks like my actions also made her refuse to use senjutsu and yujitsu, Naya. Kuroka said. It's not like I could bring her with me, Naya. A child constantly on the run, I didn't want such a life for my cute little sister, Naya. I see, was all Flynn said. There was a faraway look in his eyes at hearing the girl's tale. It was far more noble than what he did, sacrificing his entire people to get his son, only to be betrayed. Kuroka might have not known it, but the Doomslayer's opinion of her went up a bit. By the way, what's senjutsu? Flynn asked. Kuroka blinked. Senjutsu allows a person to control the flow of life energy or ki in living beings. We can strengthen both our internal and external bodies or even cause plant life around us to bloom or wither, Naya. An expert like me can sense the ki and auras of others from far away distances, which is how I evaded capture so far, Naya. I can even change my own ki to hide from others, though it's hard against powerful beings or master sensors. Then there's a technique called tuki, where people can wrap their ki around their bodies like an aura, increasing their strength, durability, and speed. Though I'm surprised you don't know, Naya. You've been covering yourself with tuki ever since I met you, Naya. It was true, when she first saw Flynn, she was astonished of how large his life force was. The best way to describe it was it matched the energy of a planet. Even the most skilled users couldn't keep tuki active indefinitely, as it put a drain on them, yet Flynn was doing it without trouble. And in some ways, Flynn was acting as a filter, absorbing the world's malice and negative thoughts into him, and yet remained completely sane. Not even Sun Wukong, a master senjutsu user, could do that. Of course, Kuroka also knew that people could acquire tuki through intense physical training, so that was also a possibility. Perhaps she is referring to the argent energy surrounding your body. It can be classified as your ki since it is generated from your body so much that it forms an armor around your body like a force field and enhances your physical capabilities, Vega said through his private link to Flynn. Perhaps we should study more about tuki, using it may prove beneficial against the demons. Who knows? Was all Flynn said to Kuroka as he fired another grenade. He was rewarded by a cry from Issei. Neither of them noticed the phoenix hiding in the trees behind them. 8 days before raiding game. Flynn had gone to see how Tiamat was doing. He left Vega in his drone form to watch over the other 3 devils who were currently sparring one another. He found the dragon looking over the hill that lead to town. Walking up said hill were Rias, Aquino and Asia, the physically weakest members of the little band of devils. All 3 girls were carrying large backpacks, filled with miscellaneous objects like rocks and sticks. Apparently, this was what Issei, Kaneko and Kiba had to do when they were coming up the hill at the beginning of the training. Tiamat saw it as a good starting method for the 3 girls in improving their bodies and stamina by having them do this at the beginning of each session. Ignoring the girls who were gasping as they were nearing the top, Flynn asked Tiamat, "So, how are they?" Tiamat shrugged. "Hard to say. Their stamina leaves much to be desired, but the king and queen's demonic power are between mid to high-class devil. The bishop is still low on all parameters. Still, I have to ask Master if it is really okay to be training these devils? Especially the host of that bastard Drake?" Flynn raised an eyebrow at the venom in her words. "I've been meaning to ask this, but what do you have against the Welsh dragon?" It was only recently that Flynn learned Issei carried the spirit of one of the heavenly dragons, Drake's power being able to double the wielder's power and transfer it to people and objects. "It was before the Great War. Drake had borrowed some of my treasure for his upcoming battle with Albion, the vanishing dragon. After the 2 were killed, my treasure was stolen by human thieves and scattered around the world. Ever since that happened, I've been chasing after the bastard and his possessors for a long time in order to retrieve my stolen treasure." Tiamat answered with a growl. "Must have been some valuable treasure." Flynn commented. Yes it was." Tiamat muttered shamefully. For some reason she was unable to look at Flynn after that, as if trying to hide something. For days before raiding game. Flynn sighed as he sat down on a chair. Presently he was watching Tiamat sparring against the devils except for Asia. Kuroka had gone and wandered off as she usually did. Vega had suggested the idea of a spar to see how much the young devils had improved and work on their teamwork. Flynn was going to volunteer, but Vega managed to convince him not to, since there was a good chance he might, accidentally, kill the devils. Thus, Flynn was stuck watching as Tiamat beat the 5 devils with ease. "So, what do you think their chances are?" Flynn asked Vega. "Hard to say. From the recordings of Riser Phoenix's previous matches, the man has a full peerage, but the only true threats are himself and his queen. However, there is no doubt that the rest of his servants are experienced. However, these 6 devils each have their own unique skills but are still inexperienced. Hypothetically, they have a 50-50th chance," Vega responded. Flynn nodded, agreeing with that assessment. As he watched Tiamat throw Issei into a tree, his phone rang. Pulling it out from his pocket, Flynn read the caller ID and saw it was Mephisto. Making sure Asia was completely focused on the match, Flynn answered. "What? Doomslayer, I trust that everything is going well with the young ones? Didn't kill them yet, did you?" Mephisto asked with a chuckle. "Quiet wretch. Did you do what I ask?" Flynn growled. "You mean about the Black Cat and her story?" "Yeah, I did some research and looks like Nibirius member was trying to create a super devil. In fact, he was affiliated with the old Satan faction too. I managed to recover enough evidence that not even those old crones in the Devil Council could refute it." Mephisto answered. "Call me curious, but why were you even asking about this? Oh my, don't tell me you're falling for the cat's woes?" Flynn growled. "Watch it. I just did it because I could possibly mock these devils for their incompetence." Mephisto chuckled. Yeah, whatever you say, Doomslayer. I'll have the documents sent to you later." Oh, and Lavinia finally came back. She says hi and thanks. With that last part, the demon hung up. Flynn sighed. He looked back at the spar and saw that it was almost over. Issei had been beaten pretty badly after trying to grope Tiamat's breasts and was currently unconscious. The others were also rather roughed up and looked exhausted. Asia was already heading over to heal them. Why couldn't life return to normal? Slaying demons was far easier than dealing with all this crap. Day after raiding game. It was the evening, and Flynn was doing a final patrol of the town on his motorcycle. With the Gremory peerage doing their raiding game and the Citri peerage not really being much help, exterminating any threats to humanity was left to the Doomslayer. So far, he had killed 3 stray devils on separate occasions. Just like the previous ones, they were all horribly mutated, insane and no challenge whatsoever. To be honest, the imps of hell put up a better fight than these strays. At least the grocery store was open. Flynn muttered as he drove back home. Though he didn't really need food, he still had Tiamat and Kuroka unfortunately to feed. Last time he remembered, Kuroka was napping back at the house, and probably still was now. Strangely, Tiamat was absent this whole day, saying she had something to do and left quickly. As Flynn turned the last corner towards his house, he frowned. Having raised to be a warrior and fought for eons, the Doomslayer had developed akin to a sixth sense. And right now, as he neared his house, said sense was going off. Everything looked normal, but Flynn could not shake the feeling something had happened. His suspicions were backed up when Vega spoke. Doomslayer, I am detecting traces of demonic energy from within the house. As if a demon had been using its powers recently. Parking his bike, Flynn pulled out his super shotgun and made his way to the front door. Not much to his surprise, the door was unlocked. In fact, when Flynn pushed it back, the top hinges fell off, causing the door to bend slightly. What greeted Flynn was a mess. Nearly the entire first floor of the house was in shambles. Furniture was knocked over and destroyed, the floor, walls and ceilings showed signs of slash marks, burns, cracks and other evidence of a fight. Finally, there was no sign of Kuroka. Immediately, Flynn summoned Vega's drone body. The AI began scanning the entire house. After a minute he spoke. I cannot fully identify these signatures, but they match those of the servants of Riser Phoenix. I will look at the security cameras. Said cameras had been installed at Flynn's request. He didn't want to take any chances of someone having sneak in, like what just happened right now. The Doomslayer watched as Vega materialized a holographic image. Said image showed Kuroka lounging on the sofa bed in the living room. Suddenly, Riser and his peerage came barging in, startling the Nekashu. After that a fight broke out. Kuroka had managed to defeat most of Riser's servants but was eventually overwhelmed by the Phoenix and a woman Vega identified as Riser's queen. After that Kuroka was bound by magical seals and teleported away. So that's what happened. A voice from behind said. Spinning around, Flynn pointed his shotgun at Mephisto's face. The demon had a calm look on his face, not perturbed by the weapon. Seeing who it was, the Doomslayer slowly lowered his weapon. What do you mean? Flynn demanded. Well, first off, you should know that the Gremory peerage lost the rating game. Mephisto said. It was pretty close, though. Those kids managed to defeat all of Riser's servants and by the end of the match only the Gremory heiress, the Phoenix and the Red Dragon Emperor were left. Gremory would have won if Riser hadn't taken her down with a surprise attack. After the match, the boy and his peerage disappeared for a while before returning to the underworld. That doesn't explain how they knew Kuroka was here. Or why they captured her. Flynn commented. Mephisto shrugged. Riser was probably spying on Rias during their training and must have seen Kuroka. Even though she's of ultimate class devil strength, Riser is quite strong himself and his queen has the power of a high-class devil. Still, they must have used some serious tricks to surprise the Black Cat, who is skilled in detecting people's ki. My guess is that he wishes to show his capture of her at the engagement party, to solidify his position as the future son-in-law of the current Lucifer. My scanners had not detected any presence, Vega noted. It's possible they used a concealing spell to hide themselves while spying on the Gremory girl. I hear his sister is quite skilled in magic. Mephisto answered. The real question is, what are you going to do? Flynn frowned. What was he going to do? To be honest, he had no reason to save Kuroka. And yet, her story had done something that moved the Doomslayer, to sacrifice everything to save the one you love, even earning said person's hatred. That, and Flynn had to admit that the Black Cat had grown on him. Gripping his weapon, Flynn looked at Mephisto. Can you take me to the underworld? He asked as he made plans to contact Tiamat. The demon smirked. I had a feeling you would ask that. Gremory Mansion, Reception Hall. Many devil nobles had gathered. Those who had close ties with either the Gremory or Phoenix clans, others hoping to gain favor with said clans or some of the other nobles. Also present were the members of those two clans as well as 3 members of the Satans. Everyone was enjoying to party, having the drinks and food made available or conversing with one another. 3 members of Rias peerage were also present. Kiba, Kaneko and Aquino, all dressed in formal attires, were standing near one of the building's corner. Unlike the rest of the occupants, they did not feel any joy. Only shame and anger at their failure to free their king from this engagement. All activity stopped when a large pillar of fire appeared on the stage. When it died down, it revealed a triumphant Riser Phoenix, dressed in a flamboyant white suit glittering in the light. Beside him was Rias Gremory, wearing a white wedding dress that enhanced her beauty. Her expression was the opposite of Riser's, her gaze downward. "Greetings, my fellow devils. Riser is honored that you have all come for my engagement," Riser said out loud, earning applause from the devils. "However, I can tell that there are some among you who do not approve or cannot accept me as the husband of Rias Gremory. And I agree, after all, she is the younger sister of our esteemed Lord Surzex Lucifer." His words had some murmurs among the crowd. Even Rias was looking at her fiancé in confusion. What was he up to? Thus, I decided to prove my worth. It was only by chance did Riser discover a certain dangerous criminal hiding in the very town my fiancé governs. Riser snapped his finger and another pillar of fire appeared beside him. This one revealed his 2 rooks and queen standing proudly. What caught everyone's attention, however, was the bound Kuroka. Said Nekashu was on her knees, her skin slightly bruised, her clothes torn, and her neck and wrists bound by magical cuffs, cutting her off from her power. She growled, glaring at Riser. Many devils were shocked to see an SS-class criminal here, captured, but none so than said criminal's little sister. Kaneko had dropped the plate she was holding, slowly backing away. Her golden eyes widened in shock, memories returning that she would rather forget. Kaneko was so shaken that she didn't even register Akino and Kiba trying to console her. Before Riser could make any more boasts, the hall's door was slammed open. Running into the room was a certain perverted pawn. "Bucho!" Issei Hayadu's scream made the devils in the room turn their heads to look at him with wide eyes before everybody burst into shocked chatter. Rias also looked at Issei with wide eyes. She didn't expect him to come here shouting like that. "To all the high-class devils here. My name is Hayadu Issei of Kuo Academy and pawn of Rias Gremory-sama. I have come to take Bucho back," Issei declared as the door closed behind him. "Use!" Rias shouted with joy. "You!" roared Riser in anger. The pawn of Rias Gremory glared at Riser right in the eye. Walking up to the center of the room, he declared with a loud firm voice, "Riser Phoenix. I won't let you marry Bucho. Her virginity belongs to me." You could hear a pin drop at that declaration. Even Kuroka, who had been secretly hoping that it was another certain person, stared at the pawn in bewilderment. Soon, devils were talking out loud, asking questions, demanding to know what was going on. "Calm down everyone, this was an event I organized," a male voice said. Walking forward, Surzex Lucifer got everyone's attention. Behind him was his maid, wife and queen, Graphia Lucifudge. "Lord Lucifer. What are you talking about?" Riser asked, trying to be respectful at the same time. Surzex smiled. "You see, I wanted to see the power of a dragon, so I asked Graphia to bring the boy here." There were a few outcries at this irresponsible act, but Surzex spoke above them. "The rating game from last time was very entertaining. But it was a bit disadvantage for my little sister who had no experience to face off against Riser, who is a prodigy from the House of Phoenix." "Are you saying you found the game unfair, my lord?" Lord Phoenix, Riser's father, asked. No, not at all. If a Satan such as myself says such thing, then I would be making the old nobles look bad. The connection between the high-class devils is important after all," Surzex claimed. "Then, Surzex, what do you intend to do?" An older man with red hair like Rias and Surzex asked. Surzex smiled at him. "Father. I want to make my cute little sister's engagement party into a flashy one. Dragon versus Phoenix. Don't you think it's the ultimate event? To stir up the party by having a battle between legendary creatures. There aren't any entertainments which can surpass it." No one said anything as they took his words in, still looking at the redhead devil. Surzex then moved his sight towards Issei. "Red Dragon Emperor, you have our permission. Riser, can you show your power once more right in front of Rias and I? I would like to see the strength that managed to capture the elusive black cat." Hearing the words from the most powerful devil, Riser made a fearless smile. "Very well. There is no way I can decline if Lord Surzex asks me. This Riser will show his last performance before getting married." Surzex nodded and looked back at Issei. "Now then, Dragon User. What prize do you want if you win?" "You cannot be serious, Lord Lucifer," a devil shouted, followed by several others. They were silenced when Surzex raised a hand. "He's a devil, so we need to give him something fitting for it since we are asking him to do something for us," the Satan smiled. "Now then, I can give you anything. A peerage? The most beautiful women? Wealth?" Issei thought about his options before saying, "I want you to give me Rias Gremory-sama back." Surzex nodded, a happy smile on his face. Very well. Should you win? A loud bang from outside happened, startling everyone and cutting off Surzex. Following it were more gunshots, as well as the sound of crashing, cries of pain and terror and other rather uncomfortable noises. The devils became tense for some reason. A guard finally burst through the doors, shutting it quickly behind him. Just what is going on now? A tall muscular devil with black hair asked. Lord Lucifer, there is a human invading. The guard shouted. This made the devils all gasp in shock, with even Surzex looking surprised. Kuroka looked up from the floor, her golden eyes wide before a smile formed on her lips. He just charged through and is shooting, punching and kicking anyone who gets in his way. We can't stop him, he's dash. The guard's rant was cut off when the large doors were destroyed, being ripped off their hinges. The guard was sent flying, crashing into a table. Killing intent began to fill the room, make all the devils shiver. Even the ones who were high class, ultimate class and even Satan class. Slowly walking out of the smoke was none other than Flynn Blazkowicz. In his right hand was his super shotgun, while his left hand was dragging a guard by the back of their clothes. It was hard to tell if the devil was conscious or not, given the injuries he had. Suddenly the smoke was cleared when a large, blue western dragon popped her head through. Her cold aura swept throughout the hall. Tiamat released a loud roar that caused the weaker devils to be knocked off their feet. Flynn surveyed the room with his eyes. His gaze made the devils instinctively take a step back, feeling dread for reasons they could not explain. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Flynn said, I'm here for my cat. Gremory Mansion, Reception Hall. Silence filled the hall as this human walked through the hall. Flynn tossed aside the surprisingly still alive guard like a piece of garbage. Tiamat stood proudly above him, her watching the devils fiercely. Said devils were still stunned by Flynn's exclamation. Some had expressions of confusion, others with anger. However, one of them eventually broke the silence and was of the latter. Who do you think you are? Ravel Phoenix cried as she marched towards Flynn. Memories of how this human blew up her brother's head filled her mind and she could not hold back her anger. Who are you, to challenge Big Brother? Human trash. She fumed. Her outcry made other devils speak out in anger at the audacity of this human. However, Flynn was in no mood to deal with this and without even looking, fired his super shotgun at a random devil. Said devil's left leg was blown off, its remains and blood flying everywhere. The devil fell to the floor, writhing in agony as he screamed, clutching the remains of his leg. This single action caused silence resume once more. Flynn looked back at Ravel, his trademark glare set on the young phoenix. Said girl had lost her rage and bravado, now replaced with fear. Upon seeing that glare, Ravel backed away, trying to remain out of sight. Focusing back on the main crowd, Flynn repeated himself, as I said, I'm here for my cat. And if none of you idiots can understand, I'm referring to the girl with the collar around her neck. He pointed towards Kuroka. It was at that moment Surzex decided to speak up. Excuse me. While I'm willing to entertain the idea of letting you fight Riser Phoenix, I must tell you that handing over the black cat is impossible. Lord Lucifer. Don't tell me you're actually going to listen to this human's demands. Riser exclaimed, shocked at the redhead's words. Flynn looked at Surzex, studying him intently. Indeed, he was powerful, perhaps on the same level or greater than an archvile or tyrant. However, to the Doomslayer, that wasn't very impressive. I'm afraid that young Riser is right, Surzex. Zeoticus, the father of Surzex and Rius, said. Besides not being a devil, the boy does not have any political support. Endorsing the idea to let him face Riser is impossible. I believe I can help with that. A new voice spoke. A magic circle suddenly appeared in the middle of the hall, and out from it was none other than Mephisto, complete with his cane and a purple top hat. He did a dramatic bow to the audience as the devils all gasped, recognizing the famous individual. Been a long time since I've last been to the underworld. Surzex blinked, not suspecting to see the ultimate class devil here. Lord Mephisto. It's quite rare for you to come to the underworld. Do you know this boy? Indeed, I do, Lord Surzex. Mephisto said. I found him a few months ago, unconscious and wounded. Thus, I took him in. I guess you could say I'm his caretaker, guardian, however you like to put it. He smirked when he heard Flynn snort. As such, I believe I can be the political support Lord Gremory mentioned. I'm sure that will be satisfactory for everyone here. Surzex glanced at the devil who got his leg blown off. Others were already using magic to stop the bleeding. He then looked back at Flynn. Mephisto's presence certainly explained the boy's knowledge of the supernatural. But it wasn't just that, something about Flynn unnerved Surzex. It was the same feeling that he had when he went to inspect the familiar forest. The redhead Satan had a feeling that if even he refused, Flynn would take back Kuroka through force. Also, this was a chance to watch this boy in action. I suppose that would make Mr. Blazkowicz suitable to challenge Reiser. However, regarding his demands to free the Black Cat, I'm afraid that would be difficult as I previously mentioned. She is a wanted SS criminal for killing her king. Flynn snorted. So, killing a fucker that would have done twisted experiments on her younger sister makes her a criminal? Is that what you're saying? His words made Surzex frown and gaining the attention of the other devils. Among them was Kaneko, who was surprised for this new revelation of her sister. Didn't Kuroka kill their old master out of a lust for power? As if answering the unasked question, Flynn pulled out a book that Mephisto had given him and threw it at Surzex. The Lucifer opened, skimming its contents. His frown deepened as he read more and more. Lord Nibirius was running experiments on live subjects to create a super devil. He read aloud, earning shocked gasps from the crowd. Most of which ended in failure where the subjects died horrible deaths. Mephisto added. Plus, it seems he was getting support from the old Satan faction. I don't think I'd have to explain how bad that would be if he succeeded. Some murmurs were going on now, mostly about the old Satan faction. Surzex reread the book several times, trying to find any evidence of false. When he found none, he released a tired sigh. It appears that the case on the Black Cat Kuroka will have to be investigated. Flynn Blazkowicz, should you win, you will have claim over her. Should you lose, Kuroka will remain in custody until we can sort out this mess. Reiser Phoenix, do you agree to this? Of course, Lord Lucifer. I will gladly put this pathetic human in his place. Sneered the Phoenix. Hey, wait a minute. What about Bucho? Issei shouted, a little annoyed that everyone was focused on Flynn. Flynn spared the pervert a glance. What about her? He asked in a disinterested tone. Issei glared at him. Aren't you going to save her too? Why would I? Not like she's someone important. Flynn shrugged off. Damn, that was mean. That was the thought most of the occupants in the hall had. Well then, Mephisto said, getting everyone's attention. How about we make these 2 versus 2 then? Better yet, let's have all of Reiser's peerage participate too. And why not have this fight be broadcasted among the factions? Surzex frowned. Just what are you planning, Mephisto? He thought as he looked at the ancient demon. And why would you want that, Lord Mephisto? Mephisto smirked. Why, for entertainment of course. It is rare that we get the chance to see such a battle. Think of the number of viewers we could get by broadcasting this? Surzex noted that some of the other devils were murmuring in agreement, and Reiser seemed just as satisfied, no doubt wanting to use this moment to stroke his ego and spread his name. With that, Surzex sighed. Very well then, it has been decided. A rating game will occur between Reiser Phoenix and his peerage against Issei Hayadu and Flynn Blazkowicz. Should Issei and Flynn win, then Rias Gremory will be free from her contract and Kuroka will be absolved of her crimes. Should Reiser win, Rias will marry him and Kuroka will remain detained in the foreseeable future. The game shall be broadcast to all factions. Let the game begin. With that declaration, a bright red light enveloped the said contenders as they were swiftly teleported to the stadium. As the devils prepared to watch the match, Tiamat had reverted to her human form and made her way over to Kuroka, the Nekashu still on her knees on the stage. Glaring at some nearby guards, making them step back, Tiamat burned off the shackles without harming Kuroka. You always seem to be causing trouble for Master, Cat. Tiamat scolded. Kuroka grinned sheepishly. Nyahaha, this time it wasn't intentional. She replied. How did you guys get that journal? She had recognized it as her former king's personal journal, thought lost after she had murdered him. You can thank Mephisto. Master asked him to find evidence to clear you of guilt. Somehow, he managed to get that journal along with a few other items. Tiamat huffed. It's quite rare for Master to do something like this. Guess your situation really moved him. Kuroka blushed at the fact that Flynn had gone out for her. Her blush faded when she spotted her sister from the corner of her eyes. Kaneko, or Chiron, was being supported by Rias and the rest of her servants. The young Nekasha's eyes also locked onto Kuroka's, but she quickly looked away, unsure of what to feel right now. That made Kuroka feel sadness inside her heart. Tiamat saw all this and decided to pity the Black Cat. Come, let us watch as Master burns that fool in his own flames. Grigori. What are you doing, Azazel? The question was asked by Valley, a silver-haired young man. He was inside the office of Azazel, the Governor-General of the Grigori. Said man, with brown hair and blonde bangs, was looking at a widescreen TV hanging from his office's wall. "Oh, Valley. Perfect timing," Azazel said from his chair. "Looks like Surzex is broadcasting a match right now. It's between the third son of the Phoenix clan and his peerage against the current Red Dragon Emperor and a human." That caught Vala's interest. As the White Dragon Emperor, he was destined to clash with the wielder of the Red Dragon Emperor. This was a good chance to see what his so-called rival was capable of. However, he was curious as to why a human was participating. Interesting, but who is the other person? The human? I was wondering that too. They would have to be a magician or sacred gear wielder. The kid's name is Flynn Blaskowicz. Apparently, he's been under the care of Mephistopheles. Which is weird because he hasn't been part of devil politics since the war ended. Azazel explained. The name Mephisto did indeed catch Vala's attention, but it was the human's name he was focused on. As a secret member of the Cows Brigade and the leader of the same team Kuroka was a part of, Vala knew that Ophis had sent the Nekashu to spy on Blaskowicz. When he asked, Ophis did not reveal anything, except saying she has been waiting for him. Whoever Flynn Blaskowicz must be of great importance to catch the infinite dragon god's eyes. Perhaps watching this match will prove more interesting than he thought. Kyoto. Mother and daughter were currently enjoying dinner. While Yasaka was eating in a regal manner, Kunu, as with all children, was eating quite fast. She was stuffing food either in her bowl or in her mouth. Kunu-chan. Please slow down. I don't want you getting sick. Yasaka chided her daughter. Kunu looked embarrassed, swallowing the meat that was in her mouth. Yes, Kachan. She replied meekly. At that moment a Tengu entered the room. Bowing to Yasaka and Kunu, he said, "Forgive me for interrupting your dinner, Yasaka-sama. However, I thought that you should know that the Devils are broadcasting a match right now. Blaskowicz Dano is one of the participants." That got Yasaka's attention. Ever since the incident, Kunu had been wanting to meet Flynn again. Though the human was unable to come to Kyoto due to school and work, he did send letters every now and then. She hadn't expected that Flynn would be taking part in one of those devil competitions. Kunu, however, seemed excited that she nearly jumped up. Kachan. Can we watch? I want to see Flynn and I. Can we? Can we? Seeing her daughter's excited expression, Yasaka giggled. Okay. She turned towards the Tengu. Could you please bring up a visual for us to watch? As you command, Yasaka-sama. The Tengu replied. He was also curious about how Flynn would fare. In fact, some yokai had taken an interest in the human who helped them deal with that perverted devil and save their princess. Heaven. It seems that the Red Dragon Emperor has sided with the devils. Michael, archangel and leader of heaven after God's death, said. With him was his sister Gabriel, along with Raphael and Uriel. Together, they made the four great seraphs, the strongest and highest-ranked members in heaven. The two angels were watching a screen showing the combatants appearing on a wide battle arena. That does indeed seem to be the case. However, it is surprising that Mephisto is a part of this. I don't recall him ever taking part in a raiding game, even after he turned the Dragon King Tannen into his queen. Gabriel commented. Michael nodded. Mephisto was one of the two remaining demons who had left hell after Satan began slaughtering those who would try to usurp his rule. Despite being labeled as an ultimate-class devil, heaven was weary of Mephisto more than the current Satans, due to his tricky personality, and other reasons. Michael's attention shifted to the sole human among the participants. He did look physically fit for a human, but besides that Michael could see nothing of interest. Nothing that stood out. What was the human's name again? Michael asked no one particular. It was Raphael who answered. If I recall, the announcement said it was Flynn Blaskowicz. Suddenly Gabriel gasped, holding a hand to her mouth. This did not go unnoticed by the others. Something wrong, Gabriel? Uriel asked. It's nothing, Uriel. Except. Gabriel's eyes seemed to focus more on Flynn. I can't help but feel like I seen him from somewhere. Michael frowned and looked back at the screen. Well, let us watch and see if we learn anything new. Raiding Game Arena. The participants had all fully arrived in the arena. Said arena was a wide, rectangle-shaped field. On each corner were large king pieces. And on one end were Flynn and Issei, while in the other was Reiser and his peerage. After running testing scenarios, I've concluded there is no reason for you to use the Praetor suit. Furthermore, we should wait until you reveal your true identity, as the armor will no doubt give it away, Vega noted. Flynn said nothing but cracked his neck in anticipation. He glared at Issei when the pervert looked like he was going to speak. Just to be clear, we are not teammates here. Get in my way and I won't hesitate to take you down. Flynn warned. Issei gulped and nodded. A large holographic screen appeared above them, showing Surzek's face. The field has been declared enemy territory for both sides. Thus, all pawns are able to promote. The match will end once one side is completely defeated. Understood? While all the devils were listening, Vega had spoken to Flynn. Realizing that this is being broadcast live, there is a 78.95% chance that young Kunu is watching, the AI said. Flynn internally grimaced. Guess that means I need to water down the violence here. Then begin. Surzek declared. Riser immediately took to the sky, wings of fire popping out from his back. You girls deal with the human trash. The other trash is mine. The Phoenix declared. Yes, Lord Riser. His peerage replied. Fine then you Yakitori. Let's go. Issei shouted as he promoted himself to Queen. He then raised his left arm, boosted gear appearing. Balance breaker. Welsh dragon scale mail, a voice shouted from the gauntlet. In seconds the boy was covered in a red draconic armor with what looked like thrusters on the back. He then took off and engaged the Phoenix in close combat. How fascinating. This must be the balance breaker that Mephisto mentioned, Vega said in curiosity as he and Flynn watched Issei fight Riser. However, my scans are showing that it is not fully complete. Perhaps it will reach its true form in time. Flynn had to agree. The armor was quite impressive. If given enough time, Issei might be on the same level as a prowler. Prepare yourself, human scum. A female voice brought Flynn back to see a short girl with a human staff charging at him. You will pay for your insolence towards Lord Riser. To a normal human, her speed would have put any one of them to shame. But to Flynn, she may as well have been crawling. Without any hesitation, Flynn struck out his left arm lightning fast. The back of his hand hit the girl in the cheek so hard that she was sent flying right into the walls surrounding the arena. The impact caused the wall to crack as the girl coughed up blood. Seconds later she dispersed into light. Lord Riser Phoenix's one pawn retired, a voice announced. The rest of the peerage were shocked of how swiftly one of their own had been taken out. Unfortunately, they had no time to gawk as Flynn was already upon them. Grabbing the faces of the two closest girls, the ones in maid outfits, Flynn slammed them hard against the ground, forming small craters upon contact. He then followed it up with a powerful hook kick to the belly dancer's face, sending her flying just like the first one. All three girls disappeared in green light. Lord Riser Phoenix's three pawns retired. Medical care is required, the same voice announced, this time unable to hide its shock. The surprise continued when two girls, twins, lunged at Flynn from both sides. They each had chainsaws already revved up. Flynn merely brought out his own, larger chainsaw and parried the girls just as two Nico girls attacked from the front. But it was pointless as Flynn quickly swung his chainsaw at them, slashing through their flesh and causing blood to fly out from their stomach where they were hit. The Nico girls cried out in pain as they disappeared. Flynn then followed it up by pulling out a detonating cord and wrapping it around the twins. Once they were securely held, Flynn detonated the cord, engulfing the girls in an explosion. Lord Riser Phoenix's four pawns retired. Medical care immediately. Devils. Everyone was gaping at the scene before them. At first, their attention was solely on Riser and Issei's match, but the moment the announcement came in, the image shifted to Flynn as the human demolished all of Riser's pawns, in just 10 seconds. That wasn't possible for a human to do, especially since all the pawns had promoted to queen the moment Surzek made his announcement. And he did it all with brute strength. Rias and Sona's peerage were also in shock. Though they knew Flynn was strong, they had never seen him in action, only the remains of his battles with stray devils and the slaughter of the stray exorcists and fallen angels. But, to see him fighting for the first time, they soon realized just how much Flynn outclassed them. He used no magic, no sacred gear, just pure fighting prowess to completely demolish half of a peerage who had won several rating games in the past. Despite that, they knew that the match wasn't over yet. To the side was Zekrom Bale, the founder of the Bale clan and progenitor for their famous power of destruction. As such, he was one of the two oldest devils alive and thus, like Mephisto, was originally a demon from hell. When Satan began his purge of any force that would try to oppose him, Zekrom did not hesitate to join Lucifer and the other surviving sins in leaving hell for the underworld. The then-head knew it was a risk but better to face death at Satan's hands. He knew the history of the devil race after they left hell. After all, he was there for all of it. Zekrom also knew that many of their legends were in fact true based off events that actually happened. But none of that explained the emotion he was feeling right now. The moment this person, this human, entered the reception hall, proclaiming to have come for his cat, alarm bells went off in Zekrom's head. Sweat began to slide down his face, arms and hands. Every nerve in his body was screaming at him to flee, to run as fast as he could. Old nightmares began to stir inside of him, nightmares Zekrom had thought were long gone. Then he looked at the boy's eyes, those red eyes that screamed rage and pain no living being could ever possess, not even gods. It was only when he watched Flynn wipe out half of Reiser's peerage did a horrifying thought came to mind. No, it's impossible. He couldn't possibly be. No, he was sealed away eons ago. No one, not even the seraphs, could reach his tomb. Zekrom thought as he focused on the screen. Back with Flynn. Ravel was the first to snap out of it. Everyone. We have to focus and not allow ourselves to be distracted. She shouted to the remaining girls. Bringing out her flame wings, Ravel took to the air. Carloman, Isabella, Cirrus, Shuelon. Engage him at close range. Ubeluna, Maihi, with me to provide range support. Understood, Lady Ravel. The remaining girls cried. The one in the kimono and the purple-haired one took to the skies alongside the phoenix. The remaining 4 girls rushed at Flynn from all sides. When they were halfway close, the 3 in the air fired a barrage of projectiles consisting of magical bullets and fireballs. Flynn dodged all of them as he rushed towards the 4 girls. Shuelon was the first to fall. She struck out with a leg kick, only for Flynn to dodge and grab said limb and twist it painfully. Then, throwing her over his shoulder, Shuelon landed on the ground with a loud thud. Flynn followed it up with a shotgun to the stomach. Cirrus tried to take him down with her Zweihander, but Flynn grabbed the flat sides with both hands and then twisted the blade out of her grip. Before she could react, Flynn impaled the blade through her stomach before kicking her away. In an almost berserk rage, Isabella launched a barrage of punches, all them Flynn dodged. He then grabbed her fists and delivered a powerful uppercut to the chin with his knee, sending blood flying out of her mouth. Next, Flynn threw Isabella in the path of Ubeluna's fireballs, using her as a living shield. Carloman didn't even have a chance before Flynn came at her with a jump, tackling her to the ground. Putting a knee to her chest, Flynn delivered several punches to her face before she was rendered unconscious. Pulling out his rocket launcher, Flynn put it into lock-on mode and targeted Maihi, launching a barrage of rockets. The girl didn't even have time to flee as she was struck by the projectiles, consuming her in an explosion. Somehow, she managed to survive, as her burnt body was seen falling from the sky. Her body faded into light particles before she hit the ground. Lord Reiser Phoenix's 2 rooks, 2 knights and 1 bishop retired. He then focused on Ubeluna, firing again. The queen was able to conjure a barrier between herself and the oncoming projectiles, and somehow the barrier blocked the explosions. Ravel had also positioned herself behind Ubeluna, throwing fireballs at Flynn who dodged them with ease. The Phoenix daughter could tell they would not win this one. Turning to check on her brother, Ravel saw that Reiser was also being overwhelmed by his opponent. Said person was no longer in his balance breaker, but had poured holy water on Reiser's face, greatly burning him. It took quick thinking for Ravel to make her decision. Flying closer towards Ubeluna, she whispered her plan. Ubeluna nodded and Ravel reached into her dress, pulling out a vial containing red liquid and flew towards Reiser. The 3rd Phoenix son had just received a brutal blow to the stomach from Issei's gauntlet-covered fist, amplified by the cross he was holding when Ravel arrived. The young Phoenix threw a fireball at Issei, forcing the pawn back. Ravel landed beside her brother and gave him the Phoenix tear. Brother is the key here. We need Big Brother to be in top shape if we're to beat that monster. Thought Ravel as Reiser drank to liquid. It was at that moment Graphia announced. Lord Reiser Phoenix's queen retired. Unable to withstand the barrage of rockets any longer, Ubeluna was promptly consumed in a powerful explosion. Ravel didn't even have time to register the announcement as her own body was filled with bullet holes. Though she had regeneration, hers was weaker than Reiser's, and the pain was too much to endure. She promptly vanished into light. Lord Reiser Phoenix's 1 bishop retired. That just left a recovered Riser, an exhausted Issei and completely fine Flynn. The latter had put away his chain gun and swapped out for his combat shotgun, the grenade launcher mod already attached. The Doomslayer looked at Issei, winded and wounded and clearly struggling, tried to stand up. Head back, pervert. You can't beat him in your current state. Flynn said. Issei glared at the third year. Shut up. I can still fight. So what if he's back to full health? I'll beat him down as many times as I dash. Instead of waiting for Issei to continue, Flynn struck him with the butt of his shotgun, knocking the pervert out and retiring him, much to the shock of everyone. That wasn't a suggestion. Flynn said sternly. Riser frowned but regained his cocky attitude. Humph, I'll admit, defeating my cute servants is impressive. But don't think it will be that simple with me. I'm a phoenix, and I've mastered my dash. Flynn once again cut someone off. This time firing a grenade right into Riser's open mouth. There was a brief moment, and then Riser's eyes and cheeks bulged comically before his head exploded. Seriously, you people talk way too much. Flynn muttered as he charged towards Riser, whose head had regenerated. Devils. The onlookers were in a state of shock and awe. This sole human had single-handedly wiped out an entire peerage of experienced servants while suffering no damage to himself. He didn't even look like he was trying. That caused everyone to start murmuring among each other. Some were wondering who this human was, where he came from, if he came from a line of magicians, wielded a sacred gear, or was perhaps a descendant of some hero. There were even a few voicing interests in adding him to their peerages. The last part made Tiamat scoff. Still standing beside Kuroka, the Nekash's eyes were glued to the screen, now showing Flynn facing off against Riser. The idea of turning Flynn into a devil was stupid as it was suicidal. There was no way Flynn could be turned into a devil, not with his unique physiology. And if it was possible, he would never allow it, no doubt willing to kill any devils who tried. Her eyes shifted from the screen towards Surzex. The Crimson Devil was approaching her, his maid/wife right behind him. Lucifer. Lady Tiamat. Surzex greeted respectfully. He had left his sister when she and the rest of her peerage went to Issei's side after he was rather abruptly retired by Flynn. I admit, I was a bit surprised when I saw you turning up here with that human, Flynn was it? Ajuka had been curious where his referee had gone. I'll apologize to Lord Ajuka. However, Lord Flynn is my master now and I am honored bound to serve him. Tiamat said cordially. Surzek's eyes widened a bit. He made you his familiar? He must be very powerful if he was able to do that. You have no idea. Tiamat said. In fact, what he's showing now can't even be considered the tip of the iceberg. I would prepare to console the Phoenix family in the event Master accidentally kills their son. Her last sentence had Surzex frowning. True, the human was indeed strong, but surely, he wouldn't be able to do something as kill a phoenix? Still, there was that strange feeling he got from Flynn's presence. Arena. Flynn dodged another fireball coming towards him, responding by firing several rockets at Riser. The phoenix managed to dodge a few but lost 2 limbs from the rest. Keeping to the air, Riser conjured a spear of flame and threw it at Flynn. But the Doomslayer merely smacked it to the side and fired another rocket, this one blowing a hole in the phoenix's stomach. His regeneration is quite impressive, Vega noted as Riser's wound began to heal rapidly. A repeated barrage of attacks will be necessary to defeat him. Recommend bringing him in for close-quarter combat. My favorite type of combat. Flynn said as he brought out a long chain with a pointed tip. Runes could be seen inscribed on the metal as Flynn began to spin it up for momentum. Before Riser could react, Flynn launched the chain right at him, the spear tip piercing Riser's left shoulder. The phoenix would have pulled it out if he wasn't crying out in pain. Ack! What is this? Roared Riser as he gripped the chain. He winced when his hand began to steam. What? Are these holy sigils? His words caused the onlooking devils to gasp in fright. Flynn didn't answer, instead he roughly pulled on the chain, forcing Riser to crash into the ground hard. Next Flynn jumped on top of Riser and began launching a barrage of punches into the phoenix's face. Riser tried to get up, but Flynn had him firmly pinned with his knee in the phoenix's stomach. And he was beginning to lose conscious. The mere thought that he would lose to a human of all people infuriated Riser that in a last-ditched effort, he engulfed his entire body in flames. The sudden burst created a small explosion that consumed Flynn too. Kuroka gasped when she saw this, but Tiamat remained calm. Smirking, Riser believed that he had killed the human. But that smirk disappeared when a hand grabbed him by the throat. As the smoke cleared, it revealed a still-alive Flynn. His jacket and shirt were partially destroyed, revealing the scars and runes that covered his body, including his mark over his heart. Only a few people noticed it. Grigory. Azazel did a spit take when he spotted the mark. Valley, who was entranced by the prowess that Flynn displayed, looked at his leader/guardian in surprise. Azazel? Azazel ignored the drink that had stained his clothes. Instead he paused the image, rewind a little, paused again and then zoomed towards the mark on Flynn's chest. Where the hell did that kid get that mark? And those runes? Those are Argent runes. But the only one. Azazel began murmuring to himself as he suddenly left. He had to call the other Grigory leaders for a meeting pronto. If this Flynn Blazkowicz was who he thought he was, then things had just gotten serious, nay dire. Valley remained in his seat, confused by Azazel's reaction. The White Dragon Emperor had become interested when he watched Flynn defeat all of Riser's servants with ease and then began to deliver a beatdown to the Phoenix himself. Still, he was also curious as to what those runes meant. Albion, do you know anything? Valley asked the dragon that dwelled inside of him. Not really, but I feel like I should. Albion said. I can say one thing for certain, those runes are old. Very old. And just by looking at them I can tell that they and that mark hold great power. Power, huh? Valley mused. A smile formed on his face as he began to see why Ophis had taken such an interest in this human. Heaven. Be brother. That mark. Gabriel stuttered. Her face was of someone who looked like they were seeing a ghost. She was not the only one. The moment that mark came into view, all four great seraphs were in a state of shock. For they all knew what that mark was, what it represented and who carried it. How can this be? That person was imprisoned in hell millions of years ago. Raphael exclaimed. Then how do you explain the mark? And those runes? Uriel demanded. He had momentarily caused his wings to ignite in holy flames from being surprised. Not to mention that mark. The same mark worn by the person blessed by Azrael. It has to be some kind of trick. There's just no way. Raphael tried to make an excuse but was cut off by Michael. Enough. The archangel yelled, silencing the others. Like them, he was also in shock at this, but right now they could afford to be scurrying wildly. We will continue watching the match. Afterwards we will discuss this properly and see where to proceed from there. He added. The others seemed to still be a bit shaken but nodded. Uriel, however, commented. Well, it doesn't look like the match is going to last much longer. With Flynn. Flynn was pissed. That had been one of his favorite jackets that he wore even before he got his memories back. And now this chicken torched it. With a roar he delivered a powerful kick to Riser's chin. The impact dislodged Riser's lower jaw and knocked most of his teeth out, in addition of sending him flying. However, with the chain still impaled through his shoulder, he did not get far as he stopped with a sudden jolt. Gripping the chain on his end, Flynn tugged on it hard. The result was Riser flying back towards him. When he was close enough, Flynn delivered a devastating punch to Riser's face. The strength of the punch not only blew off Riser's face but created a shockwave that shook the arena. Blood flew everywhere and stained the entire ground behind Riser. Without a care, Flynn allowed the body to drop to the floor. The Doom Slayer watched impassively as Riser's head regenerated, but it was slow. Slow enough you could see the bones of his skull before being covered by flesh. Riser was finished, more than that, he was defeated, utterly humiliated, and beaten. Looking up, he weakly saw Flynn's brown eyes glaring down at him, glowing almost ominously. The human then put his foot on top of Riser's head, ready to crush it. No longer wanting to experience any more pain, Riser said two words before losing consciousness. Forfight. Earth, eons ago. A young 6-year-old Flynn was staring at a painting in his father's personal office. The office was of a suitable size, with a desk and chair, a window at the back. There were some shelves filled with items, trophies, weapons and more objects. There were other portraits hanging on the walls. Some were of family members, Flynn's father in his marine combat armor, his mother standing on the Mars colony, both his parents and all three of them. There was even one with Flynn and Daisy when he first got the rabbit. But it was this portrait specifically that had gotten the boy's attention. The image was that of a purple serpent dragon with gray eyes in space, with dozens of small white stars in the background. The interesting part was that the dragon was biting its own tail, forming a circle in the process. Below it was a word that Flynn was trying to spell out. Awar oru Ouroboros. Ouroboros. Flynn cheered as he managed to say the word. Flynn? Jumping, Flynn Blazkowicz spun around. Walking inside was his father, William Joseph Blazkowicz III. He was wearing regular clothes, his armor levitating in a protective force field to the right of the office. The black-haired man had a small frown on his face. "Flynn, what did I tell you about coming in here?" he asked sternly, his blue eyes looking at Flynn. Flynn shuffled his feet. "Don't," he mumbled, feeling ashamed. Seeing his son's expression, William's face softened. Placing a hand on Flynn's head, the older Blazkowicz ruffled his hair. "Just remember next time. There's some stuff here that could hurt you. I don't want that, okay?" Flynn nodded, relieved that his father wasn't angry. "I'm sorry, but I wanted to see this picture." "What is it, Daddy?" he asked, pointing at said portrait. William followed his son's finger towards the painting. His eyes widened a bit before a smile formed in understanding. "Not what, son. Who is the correct term?" William said as he took the painting down so Flynn could see it better. "It's called the Ouroboros, or the Infinite Dragon. Your mother gave it to me. It is said to represent the infinite cycle of life and death, destruction and creation. In fact, your mother would liken it to the elemental wraiths." "Really?" Flynn asked, remembering the stories his Argenta mother, Joanne Bethian, would tell him about the gods of the Argenta. The ones whom her clan still worshipped despite the coming of the Makers. "Wow," Flynn said in awe and looked back at the painting. He wondered if he could ever meet them. Present time, with Flynn. Flynn was nowhere near done with this asshole. Forfeit? Wasn't this imp trying to kill him? Did he not think that he wouldn't be killed in turn? The Doomslayer found himself slowly being taken over by rage as he grabbed Riser by the throat. Flynn fully intended to rip out the devil's head, and perhaps most of his spine, from his body when he suddenly found himself warped back into the reception hall. Once more he was surrounded by gobsmacked devils while still holding onto an unconscious Riser's head. "Flynn Blazkowicz. You are the victor," Surzek said as he approached the human. "As such, you are free to have Black Cat and all charges against her shall be dropped. In addition, since Hayadu also assisted in Riser's defeat, the engagement between Riser and Rias has been cancelled." Internally, Surzek let out a sigh of relief as Riser forfeited the match. At last his sister was freed of this engagement and could now live her life freely. And apparently said life would be with her pawn if the look of adoration from her was of any evidence. To be honest, his original plan was to have the Red Dragon Emperor defeat the Phoenix, but this was also good. True, there would be a new investigation regarding the Black Cat, Kuroka. But, to study the capabilities of this young man, Flynn Blazkowicz. His feelings on what he saw were mixed. While he was pleased that Blazkowicz defeated Riser, it showed just how powerful the human was. He was strong, too strong. He mowed down the peerage with ease and in a short amount of time and didn't even break a sweat, and then crushed Riser even after the Phoenix was rejuvenated thanks to the Phoenix tears. And yet, a voice in the back of his head told Surzek was that this wasn't even a fraction of Blazkowicz's true power. That thought alone made Surzek nervous. Right now, though, his concern was getting Flynn to let go of Riser. "Now, if you could release Riser," Surzek said, but was cut off by a glare from Flynn. "And why would I do that?" he asked nonchalantly. His grip on Riser's throat tightened, enough to make the Phoenix let out a gurgle noise. "If I recall, he attempted to kill me, so isn't it only necessary to return the favor?" Surzek frowned. He could see that Flynn was dead serious on killing Riser. Damn the repercussions. "Be that as it may, I must ask you let him go. If not, I will have to use force." Flynn raised an eyebrow. There was a tense moment of silence as everyone waited to see what would happen. None of them breathed as the two stared down one another. Surely the human wouldn't try and stand against the Lucifer, would he? Before they could even blink, Flynn disappeared at a speed none of the devils had even seen before. One moment he was about to break Riser's neck, the next he shoved his fist deep into Surzek's stomach. The force of impact caused the Red Satan to let out a gasp of pain and skid back several feet. Many devils gasped at this display of strength and speed. However, Flynn titled his head, and then smirked. "Humph, show off," he muttered under his breath. The Doomslayer spared the unconscious form of Riser Phoenix a small glance. The blond young man was already being tended to. Even if Flynn didn't kill him, the devil's psyche was no doubt thoroughly broken. And sometimes, a scared demon was better than a dead one, especially for one's amusement. Fine, this place was already starting to smell anyway. "Tiamat, grab Kuroka and let's go." Tiamat nodded and helped Kuroka to her feet. The Nekashu immediately launched herself to Flynn, who was forced to catch her bridal style. He ignored Kuroka nuzzling into his neck as Tiamat activated her magic circle and the three of them vanished. The entire hall was then filled with dozens of relieved sighs, something all the devils had been holding in. There were a few exceptions. At the corner of the room, Mephisto smirked. He had been excited as he watched Flynn beat down Riser, followed by landing a strong blow to Surzek's stomach. Oh, the Red Satan might have put up a strong front. But anyone with good eyes and ears could tell that the Doomslayer had done a lot more damage than just breaking a few ribs. The devil was doing a good job of not showing how much pain he was in. Mephisto! A voice hissed, getting said demon's attention. Turning to his right, he saw Zekrom Bale march up to him. The first Bale head had an expression that was a mix of anger and fear. He got a few glances, but no one dare speak as they decided to focus on other matters. Lord Zekrom. What seems to be the matter? Mephisto asked innocently. Drop the act, Mephisto. You know why. Zekrom said as he pointed a finger. I saw how he fought. I saw that mark on his chest. It's him, isn't it? How the hell did you bring him here? Mephisto shrugged. I will neither deny nor acknowledge if it's the Doomslayer or not. It would ruin the fun. Zekrom scowled. You think this is funny? He asked. It is only a matter of time until he continues what he started. Starting with us. Zekrom finished before walking away. He needed to speak with the four Satans and fast before it was too late. Mephisto meanwhile just continued smiling. Flynn's house. The trio reappeared in Flynn's living room. The Doomslayer put Kuroka down as he stretched his arms. Now that's done with it. Kuroka, next time be more MMPH. Flynn was cut off when Kuroka suddenly latched her lips on his. It was so sudden that for the first time in his life, Flynn was stunned and confused. After a few seconds, Kuroka slowly broke the kiss, removing her hands from Flynn's cheeks. She was painting heavily while Flynn was okay, her cheeks pink and his eyes wide. That was my first kiss, Naya, Kuroka said before walking off. There was a seductive sway in her hips that Flynn paid attention to. Tiamat, who was also surprised, looked at Flynn and noticed he was strangely quiet. Master? Flynn was quiet. I need to go for a drive. He muttered as he told Tiamat to relax and that everything was fine. Next, Flynn was outside riding his bike, thus allowing him to be alone with his thoughts. He wasn't blind, it was clear that Kuroka was infatuated with him to some degree if she was willing to do that. The problem was he had no idea how to respond. Flynn wouldn't lie and said Kuroka was attractive, even a blind man could see that. However, after fighting and killing for eons, focusing on nothing but the eradication of demons, Flynn had never really focused on other things like love. There was one time he held such feelings, but that was before he lost everything. Since that time, he had buried such emotions, along with compassion, joy and pity. To be honest, this whole new experience was something he had not fully adjusted to. Not fighting every single moment, going to school, just hanging out at the house. This was all still new for him, or rather what he once had but left behind. And then there was Tiamat. While Flynn was happy to have found the little hatchling he had raised, he wasn't sure if Tiamat should come with him when Flynn eventually begins his crusade against the slaves of doom again. No matter how much she grew, she was still the little dragon he remembered. Then there were the Makers? Slayer. Doomslayer. Flynn's thoughts were broken by Vega. Stopping his motorcycle, the Slayer realized that he was not in Kuo anymore. Rather he was on the outskirts of the town, surrounded by trees, grass and rocks. Not a living person in sight. Vega, what the hell is going on? Flynn shouted as he got off his bike, immediately pulling out his combat shotgun. I do not know. One moment you were driving normally, the next I felt a foreign energy take over your mind, casting illusions perhaps. I had tried to awaken you, but the force was strong, Vega answered. Only a powerful entity could cast illusions on someone like you. Please be cautious. Flynn nodded as he scanned his surroundings. He saw nothing but could feel something close. Something strong, very strong. At first Flynn figured those devils were attempting an assassination or something. Hello. Eyes widening at the sudden voice from behind, Flynn spun around. At the same time, the Praetor suit suddenly materialized over his body. Flynn only took brief notice of that. Since he first recovered his memories, he had never once required bringing out the suit, as none of the enemies he faced required it being used. And yet the voice he heard, or rather the person who it belonged to, instinctively made him bring it out. Combat shotgun out, the Doomslayer turned towards the source and focused on the being in front of him. Despite having the appearance of a young girl, the creature could not be human. Flynn could feel the power rolling off her. Yet he stood his ground. He had faced powerful entities before, some not even demons, and prevailed. If a battle came down to it, then this would be no different. Ophis spoke once more. "I've been waiting to speak with you, Doomslayer," she said. Though her voice had no emotions, you could feel the excitement. Plus, the small smile on her face. "You are the Ouroboros," Flynn said. He relaxed a bit but remained vigilant in case she attacked. "I am. And I want you to join me," Ophis said. "Isn't that why you sent Kuroka?" Flynn questioned. He never really did ask what the Ouroboros' plan was. "I can no longer wait. For a long time, I have tried to regain my home, my silence. But the pest who inhabits it now cannot be easily beaten. Thus, I require the strength of others." She then looked straight into Flynn's eyes, even if they were covered by his helmet's visor. "You're here now, though. One who once worshipped me. One imbued with the eldritch, the divine and the demonic powers. An entity unique, even to me. I know of your strength. You can help me take back my home. From what I understand, the Ouroboros resides in the dimensional gap, the space between all worlds and even universes," Vega commented. "It's one of the reasons why the demons require things such as gore nests and hell portals to invade worlds. Now, join me." Ophis continued her speech. She was not just a few inches from Flynn, standing before him without an ounce of fear. She raised a hand. "Help me remove the pest, and I shall grant you what you desire most." Next day, Gremory Mansion. Seraphol and Ajuka were walking down the familiar hallways of the Gremory Mansion. The duo along with Falbium Asmodeus had received an unexpected summon from Zekrom Bale to meet with Surzex at his family's home. While he did not have the authority to command the Satans, Zekrom's influence over their society was equal if not greater than theirs, thus gave them some control over them. However, it was rare for Zekrom to request anything from them, and from the sound of his voice, it was something important. The butler that was escorting them opened the door to one of the mansion's many living rooms. Along with the fancy furniture, portraits and other accessories, Falbium was also present, but was surprisingly awake. Surzex meanwhile was sitting on another couch, Graphia dutifully by his side. What caught Seraphol and Ajuka's attention were the bandages around Surzex's chest, revealed by his uniform being opened. Surzex also seemed a bit pale too, as if he had just released a large amount of his contents. "Ah, you're here," Surzex said, speaking normally. "Surzex, what the hell happened to you?" Ajuka asked. He couldn't even remember the last time he saw his best friend in such a state. Not since the Civil War had Surzex been this badly injured. Surzex smiled weakly, coughing a little. "I'm afraid this is the result of getting punched in the stomach." He winced as his wife proceeded to wrap a fresh set of bandages. "All my ribs have been broken, my left lung was pierced and it's hard to eat a little." It took a moment, but Ajuka realized who Surzex was talking about. The human? The one who defeated the Phoenix boy? He did this with one punch? The Beelzebub found it hard to believe. Humans were the weakest of the races. Though there were few exceptions, Ajuka could only think of Vasco Strada back in his prime who could injure a super devil like Surzex. "I know what you're thinking," Surzex said, looking at the green-haired devil. "Flynn Blaskowicz is a rare type of human, obviously. He used no sacred gear nor magic that I could detect, not even senjutsu. It was pure strength, or maybe something else. The important part was that I even instinctively covered myself with my aura, and not even that fully protected me. In fact, you could say it's what saved my life." "You used your power of destruction and still ended up like this?" Seraphol exclaimed. The sole female Satan had already sat down, munching on some sweets. Their conversation ended when the same butler opened the door. "Apologies, Satans. But Lord Zekrom has arrived," the man said. "Let him in," nodded Surzex. The butler bowed and closed the door. Seconds later Zekrom came in. Under his arm were several stone tablets that had the same green glowing symbols on them. The tablets were old, very old going by their appearance. Yet the magic they radiated was still strong enough for the Satans to sense them. "I thank you for all coming here," Zekrom said in an even tone, still sounding polite. "Before we begin, I must ask your queen to leave, Lucifer. This is something only meant for the Satans." He finished as he looked at Graphia. Surzex frowned. What could be so important that he didn't even trust his own wife/queen to be here to listen? Nevertheless, it was clear that Zekrom was serious. Surzex gave a nod to Graphia, indicating she could leave. The maid seemed unsure, but she trusted her husband, thus complied as she walked out of the room. Once she closed the door, Zekrom cast several spells that would ensure that no one could hear what was being said. The Satans noted that these were high-level spells, meaning this must have been serious. Finally sitting down, Zekrom looked at the four. The reason I have called you here is a matter of the utmost importance, and the possible survival of our race. Does this have to do with that human boy? Falbium asked, fully awake for once. That is no boy. Zekrom snarled, surprising the younger devils with the level of malice in his tone. But he is human. First off, what do you know of our people's history? Ajuka blinked. Only what has been taught. That hell was becoming barren, resources running dry and falling apart. The original Satans moved the survivors to the underworld, where we became the devils. That's just the cover story. Zekrom revealed. To hide the truth and solidify their power hold. We, the original heads of the 72 pillars, the four original Satans, those who became the extra demons, were running. We had given our support to Lucifer to rule hell, but his coup failed, and to escape from Satan's wrath we came here to the underworld. Escape from him, and from a being who nearly brought upon us our extinction. As he finished speaking, Zekrom had set up the tablets on the coffee table. Each one had the same green glowing symbol on them. And for some reason the younger devils felt a chill go up on their backs just from looking at it. One by one, Zekrom gently pressed each symbol. As he did, a deep demonic voice began to speak. In the first age, in the first battle, when the shadows first lengthened, one stood. Burned by the embers of Armageddon, his soul blistered by the fires of hell and tainted beyond ascension, he chose the path of perpetual torment. In his ravenous hatred he found no peace, and with boiling blood he scoured the umbral plains seeking vengeance against the dark lords who had wronged him. He wore the crown of the Night Sentinels, and those that tasted the bite of his sword named him, the Doom Slayer. Tempered by the fires of hell, his iron will remain steadfast through the passage that preys upon the weak. For he alone was the Hell Walker, the unchained predator, who sought retribution in all quarters, dark and light, fire and ice, in the beginning and the end, and he hunted the slaves of doom with barbarous cruelty, for he passed through the divide as none but demon had before. And in his conquest against the blackened souls of the doomed, his prowess was shown. In his crusade, the seraphim bestowed upon him terrible power and speed, and with his might he crushed the obsidian pillars of the blood temples. He set forth without pity upon the beasts of the 9 circles. Unbreakable, incorruptible, unyielding, the Doom Slayer sought to end the dominion of the dark realm. The age of his reckoning was uncounted. The scribes carved his name deep in the tablets of hell across eons, and each battle etched terror in the hearts of the demons. They knew he would come, as he always had, as he always will, to feast on the blood of the wicked. For he alone could draw strength from his fallen foes, and ever his power grew, swift and unrelenting. None could stand before the horde but the Doom Slayer. Despair spread before him like a plague, striking fear into the shadow dwellers, driving them to deeper and darker pits. But from the depths of the abyss rose the Great One, a champion mightier than all who had come before. The Titan, of immeasurable power and ferocity. He strode upon the plain and faced the Doom Slayer, and a mighty battle was fought on the desolate plains. The Titan fought with the fury of the countless that had fallen at the Doom Slayer's hand, but there fell the Titan, and in his defeat the Shadow Horde were routed. And in his terrible rancor between worlds and through time, the Hell Walker found the wretch who shall not be named, but in his heresy was loyal to his evil cause. The wretch adorned the Doom Slayer in a mighty armor, wrought in the forges of hell, impenetrable and unyielding. With sword and shield of adamant strength, the Doom Slayer set to banishing all that were left unbroken by his savagery to the void. Yet as the mighty Titan fell and dread engulfed the armies of doom, the demon priests of the blood temples laid a trap to capture this scourge of hell. Insatiable, even by the vanquishing of the Great One, the Hell Walker sought prey in the tombs of the Blood Keep. And blinded by his fervor, the lure drew him in. The priests brought down the temple upon the Doom Slayer, and in his defeat entombed him in the cursed sarcophagus. The mark of the Doom Slayer was burned upon his crypt, a warning to all of hell that the terror within must never be freed. There he lies still, and evermore, in silent suffering. Silence reigned in as the last tome finished. All of 4 Satans had their eyes glued to the tomes, as if expecting that voice to speak again. Zekrom had his arms crossed, a stern frown on his face. Surzex swallowed. The sheer intensity of the voice and how it spoke the story was enough to make him nervous. Such a being, did he truly exist? Ajuka asked, the first to finally speak. I saw him once. Back when I was young. Zekrom said. The memories of the invasion of Argent Dnur surfacing after so many years. I led an army of 1,000 demons, many of whom were ultimate and Satan class. None of them stood a chance as the Slayer slaughtered them with his bare hands. He looked at the two super devils in the room. Even if you worked together, unleashed your true forms, you would be naught but more lives to add to his tally. We couldn't even kill him for fear of his soul returning to torment us more. And this Flynn Blazkowicz, you think he could be him? Serafal asked, no longer cheerful but now serious. I saw his body, he had his mark on his chest. Zekrom replied. I don't know how he escaped or ended up here, but it's only a matter of time until he decides to continue what he started. He then looked directly at Surzex and Serafal. We need to keep an eye on him, which is why I want your sisters and their peerages to keep watch over Blazkowicz. What? Surzex cried, with Serafal also having a look of outrage. He shot up but immediately sat down, wincing as his wound pulsed. Ajuka helped his friend get comfortable. If what you say is true, then we need to evacuate them immediately. As their siblings, it's our job. Your job is to protect the underworld. Zekrom shouted, startling the younger devils. To protect our kind. That is why you took the position of Satan's. The Doomslayer is the greatest threat to our people in our entire history, even more than the other factions. Do not let your personal feelings get in the way of your duty. We must be prepared should he finally decide to make his move. If you cannot, then I will have to push for you to resign from your posts. The Satans were silent. While they were technically the leaders of the devils, it was Zekrom Bale who held the strongest political influence among their kind. In fact, it would be best to say that the Great King was the true ruler of the underworld, ever since the original Satans died in the war. His threat was not just hollow words, but a fact. Zekrom could easily strip them of their rank or limit their power. They knew he would never do anything drastic but could still do something the Satans would regret. So, with a heavy heart, Serafal and Surzex had no choice but to rein into his demands. Unknown location. Azazel. Michael. Azazel and Michael, leaders of the Grigori and Heaven respectively, were meeting in a restaurant owned by the former VIP section so they could talk in private. Despite being on opposing sides, there was still a sense of camaraderie, familial ties, that they could communicate with one another friendly. Both were wearing their normal attires, though Azazel's suit was more casual and normal than Michael's robes and armor. When you asked to speak with me, a lot of my boys were a bit nervous. I told them that it was okay, though. You're not the type to put down traps. Azazel said with a small smile. It disappeared when Michael didn't return it with one of his signature smiles. I'm guessing you saw the broadcast from yesterday. The ones the devils showed. Yes. Michael responded. Do you know anything about who requested it to be aired publicly? From what I managed to learn, it was Mephisto. Azazel said as he took a drink of beer. Excluding the fact that the man hasn't been involved with devil politics since the war, his presence confirms my own theories. I'm guessing you had the same as me. Michael nodded. The Doom Slayer. That boy, Flynn Blazkowicz, is him. I already looked at the Book of Souls, and his name could not be found. The mark on his body also proves his identity. Azrael's chosen. Mused Azazel. The two angels had a faraway look as they recalled their brother. Heh, I can never forget that guy. His personality did not fit his appearance or title as Angel of Death at all. There was no one more compassionate or loyal as him. Michael said in agreement. His disappearance was a great loss to Heaven. Even Father mourned him. Sometimes I wonder how things would be if he was still here with us. Out of all of us, he was the one who took Helel's betrayal the hardest. And what he did to Earth. Azazel added. But that never stopped him from ensuring that the souls of the deceased made their way safely to Heaven. Perhaps that's why he helped the Doomslayer. Back to the Slayer, how do you suppose the devils will react? Michael asked. Azazel shrugged. Their leaders made sure any knowledge of him was sealed off. The only one who would probably recognize him would be Zekrom. He will probably tell the Satans but won't do anything drastic. The old guy knows that with their current situation they cannot do anything that will risk their safety. Now for the old Satan faction. They might try doing something dangerous. Michael finished. Heaven is not like what it once was. We do not have the strength to face them as we could in the past. Not after what happened with Argent Dnur, the Wraiths and Urdak. You still can't get through the Makers? Azazel asked. The Archangel shook his head. We have been completely cut off from them. The only evidence we have that they have not turned on us is because the system remains active, so they must be gathering believers from across the stars. Other than that, I do not know what the Khan Maker is doing. Azazel hummed. Well, nothing we can do about them, makers or demons. Might as well focus on the Doomslayer. What is Heaven's plan? For now? Nothing. Michael answered. We do not have the manpower to observe him and guard our borders at the same time. But we shall try to keep our ears open. What about you, brother? Not sure yet. I got wind that he killed a small team of mine because they decided to go rogue. Might be risky to get in contact with him. Azazel explained. However, Tobio told me the Doomslayer rescued Lavinia. I might try sending his team since it's less likely he'll kill them. I see, Michael said. I know this may sound strange, but please keep me informed of any new developments regarding Flynn Blazkowicz. Azazel shrugged. He saw no problem with that. Sure, so long as you do the same. Now let's order something. This restaurant makes some damn good pasta. Same time, Kyoto. A magic portal appeared in front of Yasaka's home. Seconds later Flynn came riding out on his motorcycle, wearing his casual clothes, a sage shirt, black jeans, leather jacket and black boots. He parked the bike near the gate, taking his helmet off and placed it on one of the bike's handlebars and then using Argenta runes to ensure the bike could not be stolen. I was not aware you could use your people's runes, Vega said. How else do you think I could use all those runes I picked up when on Mars and in Hell? Flynn asked rhetorically. He showed his identity to the guards as they let him enter the grounds. My mother taught me them, and I learned more about them back on Argent Nur. Never saw much use for them except for support, to be honest. Still, never hurts. Back to yesterday, are you sure it was wise to reject the Ouroboros offer? Vega asked. Surely it could have helped you eliminate the demons. Whether it could or could not is up for debate. And there's no telling if it would keep its end of the bargain. Answered Flynn. Besides, wiping out the demons wasn't his only desire. Though it was strange that it left after that. It could have taken me by force. You give it too much credit, Doomslayer. Though a powerful entity, I calculated that you had a 50% chance of victory. Despite that, the resulting conflict would have resulted in massive collateral damage and no doubt drag in humans. I can only assume it will return later to make the same offer again. We'll see. Was all Flynn said. He was just about to knock on the door when a golden blur to slam into him. The impact would have knocked down anyone else, but for Flynn, he merely staggered a bit before holding said blur. It was none other than Kunu who was clutching Flynn's shirt. Hey Kunu, been good? Flynn asked as Kunu continued to hug Flynn. Yeah. Ka-san and I watched you beat up that stupid devil. You were so cool. Kunu cheered, earning a smirk from Flynn. The young Kyuubi took her position on Flynn's shoulders as the Doomslayer entered. In the living room, sitting at a table was Yasaka. Vega had materialized a drone body and was hovering beside Flynn. Hello Flynn-san. I'm glad that you're doing okay. I was worried that you might still be recovering from your battle. Yasaka said politely. I wasn't even hurt. Flynn said as he sat down opposite of Yasaka. Kunu had gotten off his shoulder and had gone over to some markers and papers that were on the floor nearby. While she was doing her own thing, Flynn kept speaking. Were you two the only ones watching the match? No, there were a few others. A lot of Yukai were quite pleased to see you demolish that devil so quick and easily. Yasaka replied. She recalled how many of her people cheered Flynn took down each of Riser's servants, following the beatdown the Phoenix Scion himself faced. If you don't mind, what exactly is your relationship with the Black Cat, Kuroka? And the Chaos Karma Dragon for that matter? The older Kyuubi asked, subconsciously leaning forward a bit. A bit confused by her question, Flynn went on to explain the situation. It took about a good 20 minutes, but by the end Yasaka seemed pleased with what she heard. She seemed most relieved when Flynn said that Tiamat was his familiar and his connection with Kuroka was simply professional. I see. I had my suspicions about her so-called madness, but to hear that her former king attempted to force make a super devil is quite appalling. My only regret is that I didn't get to put the scumbag down myself. Flynn commented. Anyway, your message said you had a job for me? Ah yes, that. Yasaka said. In a few hours, delegates from the Norse pantheon will be arriving soon. I've been asked by the Shinto leaders to meet with them as their representative and leader of the Kyoto Yukai faction. Norse? Flynn repeated. He had read about them from the information that Mephisto gave him. Why would they be coming here? Sometimes factions and pantheons would meet for mutual benefits, or to maintain stability between our sides. It doesn't happen often, but enough that it isn't uncommon either. Yasaka explained. However, that also makes it a good opportunity for others to act. People dissatisfied with the status quo, wishing to use this opportunity to cause conflict between factions. Others who want to usurp current leaders and take over. At the moment, there have been strange actions happening near the borders of Kyoto and my forces are currently spread thin. So, that is why I wanted to hire you. Rest assured you will be properly paid. Okay. Yasaka said. Really? She asked, surprised by the quick response Flynn gave. Flynn shrugged. Sure, I've been needing some cash and a chance to get away from that devil town. Besides, I don't mind helping out. Great. I'm so happy. Exclaimed Yasaka, surprising Flynn by her enthusiasm. When she realized this, she calmed down, a small blush on her cheeks. Your presence will be a great boon for me, for more reasons than one. Is the leader of the Norse faction that much of a problem? Flynn asked. Yasaka frowned. Not for reasons you would think. The Allfather Odin is known for his willingness to have peaceful talks with other factions. The problem is that, how can I put this? He's an Eroji-san. Kunu exclaimed from her spot. She had just finished her drawing of Flynn. Kunu. Yasaka admonished her daughter, but it was clear that Kunu's description was correct as she went on how Odin would do perverted stuff in front of the leader of Kyoto. Flynn frowned as he heard all of this, finding this all rather disturbing. He then looked at Yasaka. Want me to castrate him? Kuo Academy, Student Council Room. It was lunchtime, and as students were enjoying themselves, Rias was meeting with Sona presently. The two were eating lunch while playing another game of chess. Rias had not said much after the whole fiasco in the underworld, besides moving in with Issei. The two had just received orders from the siblings to spy on Flynn Blaskowicz in the event he became a danger to the devils. Except he's not here right now. Rias said as she moved a knight, taking one of Sona's pawns. Sona countered by removing a rook. According to the report, he went to Kyoto. Though it said he was seeing family, I would have to guess that he was hired for a job by the leader of the West Yukai faction. Rias blinked. That's quite the theory. It would mean he has ties with the Yukai and magicians if Lord Mephisto is his caretaker. The redhead said as she moved a bishop. On that note, I asked my sister if there was a chance that I could ask Lord Mephisto information about Blaskowicz. It would have made our job easier. But she said that was impossible as he would not have answered our questions. Sona said with a frown. There was an annoyed tone in her voice. That's concerning in its own way. Rias said as she folded her fingers. She had watched carefully during the match between Flynn and Issei against Reiser and his peerage. The human had displayed physical prowess far above humans who wielded sacred gears or used magic, having easily dismantled her ex-fiancé's peerage when it took her servants considerable effort to beat them. Then the way Flynn brutally beat down Reiser, not giving him a chance to heal, was particularly disturbing, with the rage Flynn showed quite terrifying if she confessed. Rias had also seen the state of her brother after Flynn punched him. In all her life she had known him, the Gremory heiress had never seen Surzex with such injuries. And from what she had heard, not even during the Civil War had the Lucifer been wounded to such a degree. It made Rias and Sona wonder just what kind of power Flynn possessed. At first, they thought he had a sacred gear given the way he could summon weapons out of nowhere, and yet for some reason they could tell that was not the case. Their next theory was that he was a magician, and yet from their own experience in magic, Flynn did not seem to possess such talents besides alchemy. Then there was the case of divine energy Flynn was giving off. It was strange because while it felt like the holy energy one would feel from a pure angel, it also felt like the divine energy of a god, and yet at the same time it did not. There was a mix of demonic energy in it too. It was rather confusing because such an aura could only come from races like a Nephilim, and yet Rias doubted that Flynn was anything but human. Rias had thought about sending familiars to spy on Flynn's house, but decided against it. Even if Flynn wasn't there, Tiamat was no doubt keep watch and Kuroka would probably sense them with senjutsu. Kuroka. The name had been a difficult subject for her peerage over the past few days. The truth of her actions had caused an uproar in the underworld. Despite the changes done to their society and how they tried to profess that they had changed, devils would always be slaves to their true nature. In this case, their refusal to accept that Kuroka was in the right. Of course, some sympathized with the now former stray devil, particularly Seraphal as an older sister herself. However, none of them wanted to incur the wrath of a Dragon King or Flynn Blazkowicz. Even now, some of them could still feel the sensation of dread. Back to her peerage, all of them except Issei and Asia knew about Kuroka due to her younger sister Chiron, now Kaneko, being a part of Ria's peerage. The first year had been distant since the raiding game. When the truth had been revealed, she had first been in shock, having thought that all this time Kuroka had abandoned her. Now though, Rias was not sure what Kaneko would do, but for the time being she had her rook exempt from taking requests, having either Issei or Asia do them. It would be a while until Kaneko returned to her old self. And as much as Rias hated to admit it, the only person who could help with that was Kuroka. Grigori. Let me get this straight, Azazel. Tobio accused, a black-haired, pale gray-eyed man and wielder of the Longinus Canis Lycaon, one of the strongest members in Grigori, and leader of his own team / dog, said as he looked at his boss. You want me and my entire team, fully armed, to go to Kyoto and meet with this Flynn Blazkowicz, a potential enemy, who is also working for Yasaka and is to be currently meeting Odin. Did I miss anything? Azazel smirked, amused by the rather annoyed expression on his protégé's face. Oh, come on Tobio. Don't tell me that you're not bored from being in the base for so long. And I'm sure you're just as curious of this Blazkowicz fellow too. Tobio frowned. He would be lying if he said he wasn't about this man. When he first heard that Lavinia had been captured by a perverted devil, Tobio was about to charge into Kyoto to save her despite the political repercussions that would come from it. Hell, his whole team and even Valley were worried about her, especially the latter who had a brother-sister relationship, though the divine dividing wielder would always deny it. He was relieved that she was rescued and unharmed, having met with her after the whole ordeal. From her, he learned about her savior. So, at the very least he wanted to thank Blazkowicz, and Lavinia was also interested in officially meeting him. Fine, I'll go, but I'm not bringing Valley with me. The brat will probably try to pick a fight with Blazkowicz. Tobio said. I thought the same thing, so I sent Valley on another mission. Said Azazel. He did not make mention of his worries that the Doomslayer might kill Valley because of his devil heritage. Get your team ready and let me know when you're going to leave. If all went well, then the Grigori would be the first to establish good relations with the Doomslayer. Azazel still wasn't sure if he was at full power, but it wouldn't really matter. Even a weakened Hellwalker was a danger. The other reason was because if the Doomslayer was here, then there might be a chance that the demons would appear sooner or later. If that were to happen, then it would be important that they had the Slayer on their side, if not then have a friendly relationship. In all their history, not once has Heaven's forces been able to invade Hell, even when God was still alive. Only the Night Sentinels and the Doomslayer held that achievement. Now he could focus on whatever trouble that idiot Kokobile was causing. Kyoto. Flynn felt out of place. After being alone for so long, being in a populated area that was not full of demons felt off. Even when he had to pretend to be a student at Kuo, he would keep to himself. The Doomslayer ignored the looks from passerby as he waited for this Odin guy. He and Kunu were standing at the train station reserved for yokai and other supernatural beings. Well, more like Flynn was standing. Kunu had decided to sit on the Slayer's shoulders as they waited for the Norse delegation. Hovering beside them was one of Vega's drone bodies. They got a few looks from the yokai, mostly because they recognized the Princess of Kyoto. Some also knew who Flynn was, given his accomplishment when he was last in the city. A few female yokai gave him seductive and lustful looks while a few briefly flirted with him. That had caused Kunu to glare at them and grip Flynn tighter. So, any signs of this Odin guy? Flynn asked. I am detecting a strong divine energy signature, plus a weaker one nearby. They might be the delegation, Vega said. Kunu chewed her bottom lip as she looked around. Suddenly her eyes widened. There they are, she exclaimed, pointing with a finger. Following her finger, Flynn spotted two people approaching them. At the front was an elderly man with long, gray hair, and a matching beard. Over his left eye was a white and golden monocle without a chain. He wore a blue and white robe with golden lining and matching shoes, as well as a gold and black hat with blue orbs pointing in ornate ways. Behind him was a beautiful young woman with long, straight silver hair and aqua-colored eyes who appeared to be in her late teens wearing a gray business suit. You must be young Kunu, Lady Yasaka's daughter. The old man said as he glanced at the young Kyubi. Said girl had gotten off Flynn's shoulders and stood before the god. Now in her princess mode, Kunu did a short bow. Yes, welcome to Kyoto, Odin Dano. We are honored by your presence. Kunu said politely. Odin nodded. His gaze shifted to the man whose shoulders Kunu was sitting on. "And you are?" Flynn Blazkowicz, the Doomslayer said, crossing his arms over his chest. "And you must be Odin." Odin appeared surprised by the man's identity before nodding, a smirk on his face. "That I am. I admit, I watched your little match with the Phoenix boy. Quite impressive in taking down someone with such a strong healing factor in such little time." Odin said. "Wasn't that hard? The idiot was too reliant on his power. I would have killed him if I didn't feel like dealing with the repercussions." Flynn commented. That made the old god laugh. "Ah. Someone who is not afraid to speak his mind. I respect that," he said. "Now, before we get going, I must ask, you wouldn't happen to know where the best adult facilities are, do you? My first time in this city." Flynn felt his left eyebrow twitch, tempted to carry out what he had offered to Yasaka. He was stopped when Odin's aide spoke up. "Lord Odin, please be serious. You're here for official business regarding dealings between factions. This is not the time to act your usual self." Odin rolled his eyes. "Sheesh, lay off will you? This is why you're still single," he said dismissively. Flynn watched as the girl's personality did a 180. Her lips began to quiver, and you could see tears forming in her eyes. It's not like I asked to be single. I want a boyfriend like any other girl," she exclaimed. Ignoring her, Odin looked at Flynn and Kunu. "Anyway, this is Rosweiss, my bodyguard. She's a Valkyrie and the years she has been a virgin is equal to her age," Odin said. That seemed to have been the final straw as the newly introduced Rosweiss collapsed. Folding her legs, she wept at her status as single and a virgin. Her act got her some attention from passing by Yukai. Flynn just sighed, giving one last glare towards Odin before helping the downed Valkyrie to her feet. He missed the blush on Rosweiss' face as he looked at Odin. "If we're done with the soap opera, can we get moving?" he asked as Kunu climbed back onto his shoulders. Giving his bodyguard a mischievous smile after seeing her reaction to Flynn's act, Odin nodded. "Yes, let us be on our way. I must admit, I am quite excited to see Lady Yasaka again. Especially her." His sentence was cut off when Flynn pulled out his combat shotgun, pumping it for extra measure. The look on his face made the god change his words. "Her pleasant smile." Odin quickly finished. Elsewhere in Kyoto. Within a dark room, growls could be heard, followed by the sound of something being dragged across the floor. In the center of the large room, a pile was being formed. Once the pile was large enough, chanting came next as groups of individuals formed a circle around said pile. To the side, more individuals were standing and observing the ritual. Approaching them was another person, causing the others to look at them. Doing so revealed that many of them had different number of glowing eyes, mostly 1, 2, 3, 4, or none at all. Once the ritual is complete, all of Kyoto will feel its presence. Before that happens, prepare the additional summons. I want a team to head towards the palace and capture the Yukai leader. I do not care how she is brought in, but I want her alive, for now," the figure said. The others made no sound, except silent nods. They then left, going to carry out their task. The leader turned around and looked at the ritual. The pile silhouette began to shift. Its form began to change, and noises could be heard as it did so. At the same time, it began to glow. An ominous noise could be heard and a sinister red color could be seen. The glow slowly started to become brighter as its form began to stabilize. Minutes later, Yasaka's palace. "Welcome Lord Odin. I hope everything is well in Asgard," Yasaka said respectfully. The leader of Kyoto Yukai bowed, unintentionally revealing her generous cleavage. Odin gave a brief glance at them, not missing the glare Flynn was sending him from behind Yasaka. The two leaders were inside the meeting room where Yasaka met with all important individuals. Rosweiss, Kunu and Flynn were also present, the Valkyrie sitting behind Odin while the other two were behind Yasaka. "Yes, it is an honor to be back too, Lady Yasaka. Asgard is doing well, save for a few elements," Odin said as he sat on the other end of the table. With the pleasantries out of the way, the two leaders began their discussion. Most of it was about possible agreements on resources, territory, and other possible trades. Now and then they would bring up interesting topics such as problems in their own territory that might affect the other, a few offhanded comments, new events happening, and other bits of information. Flynn zoned them out as he was not really that interested. Even back on Argent Nur, politics were something he cared little for. Then suddenly, it came. A feeling began to wash over him. One he had not felt since he first arrived here. It was the feeling that appeared whenever they were around. One that he had been consumed with for eons, becoming a part of his life just as one needed to eat, drink, and breathe. A sensation that caused his hand to clench into a fist unconsciously. The emotion of rage. The others did not seem to notice, but Flynn could feel that something was wrong. Vega. My scanners are detecting it too. Demonic entities inbound to your right in 3, 2, 1. Summoning his predator suit, Flynn swiftly pulled a surprise Kunu closer to her equally confused mother while he stood in front of them protectively. Odin and Rosweiss must have finally sensed something wrong because their postures stiffened just as the right wall exploded. Demonic plasma bolts came flying out, heading straight towards them. Flynn's armor took the brunt of the damage while Rosweiss conjured magic barrier around them. Bringing out his chain gun, Flynn put it into turret mode. Spinning it up, all 9 barrels fired a barrage of uranium-coated bullets at the smoke. He was rewarded with cries of pain and sounds of bodies falling. A second later, out of the smoke, one of the attackers who survived lunged at a surprised Rosweiss, who had before lowered the barrier after a false sense of security. Gripping the person's arm, Flynn snapped it in half, causing the person to roar in pain. Its voice was silenced when Flynn delivered a devastating blow to the head, breaking the neck and twisting it to an unusual angle. With the brief shootout done and the smoke cleared, the 5 finally got a better look at their attackers. They all had humanoid forms, and over their bodies they wore blood-red armor that almost looked like flesh with various styles. As Yasaka's guards came charging in and making sure their leader and princess were okay, Flynn took that moment to examine the bodies up close. Gripping the helmet of the close's body, he tore a piece off, noticing how it seemed to peel off the face. Said face was pale and its red eyes were wide open. Vega? Scanning, the armor is definitely demonic in origin. It appears to be a combination of both inorganic and organic material, a common trait among the legions of hell, Vega explained after scanning the material. I've never seen this type of demon before, though. Flynn noted. Even though he managed to kill them easily, it was most likely it was because they were taken by surprise. In truth, Flynn had to compare them to at least the same level as Barons of Hell. Some kind of new breed? He asked as he examined the organic rifle the demon had used. He recognized it from eons ago, the weapon being called the Reaper. It used to be used by the Hell nobles of old before he wiped the majority out. He even used a few once or twice before being sealed. Most likely. My scans indicate that these were in fact former devils, revealed Vega. Startled, Flynn accidentally crushed the armor piece in his hands. A devil? You're certain? Quite. From my initial scans of their kind, devils seem to possess a less chaotic and unstable demonic energy as their ancestors do. In addition, this demon's physiology is still relatively human-like as all devils possess, as well as showing signs of higher intelligence than most demon types given their attempt to conceal their presence upon reaching here. Though this may not sound scientific, these devils have been re-demonized, explained Vega. He was quiet for a moment before speaking again. I have finished my scans of the demonic energy. It originated somewhere towards the south of Kyoto, near city limits. Nodding, Flynn got up and approached the others. Vega says they came from the southern part of the Kyoto. There might be more there too. Yasaka frowned. That's one of the oldest places in the city. Barely anyone lives there. She said. It would explain why you didn't know about them, especially if they were using magic to conceal themselves. Flynn commented before pulling out his combat shotgun. I'll head over there and deal with any of the demons who might be left. You should stay here. Yasaka looked ready to complain, but Flynn cut her off. They were after you. You control the city's ley lines. If they get you, then who knows what they will do. Despite wanting to argue, Yasaka could see Flynn's point of view. Fine, but I will have the guards stationed near there informed and sent to support you. I will not allow this threat harm my people. If it's firepower, then take Rosweiss with you. Odin suggested. I can stay here and make sure the bastards don't touch Lady Yasaka. My bodyguard is good at bombardment spells, so she'll be good backup. Said Valkyrie nodded, having already changed into her armor. Flynn sighed. Fine, but stay close. He prepared to leave but paused to rub Kunu's head reassuringly when he saw the worried look on the young Kyuubi's face. He looked at Yasaka. Tell the guards to set up a blockade around the area. Do not let any of them out of there. Flynn added before leaving. Southern Kyoto, near outskirts. Thankfully Rosweiss used a teleportation circle to send herself and Flynn to their destination. Looking around, Flynn was surprised and pleased to see that Yasaka had already sent out orders for her soldiers to lock down the area. While some were forming a wall, another group of soldiers were escorting civilians out while others were using jiu-jitsu. According to the Predator suit's new scanners, they were ensuring humans would not notice the disturbance and keep the demons from getting past the blockade. While helpful, the barrier will not be able to fully stop them if more demons appear. We should move quickly, Vega suggested. Flynn nodded before heading towards the barricade. Some of the soldiers saw him and, recognizing him from the description, stepped aside so he could get through. Looking back at Rosweiss, Flynn said, "Last chance to back down and stay here." Rosweiss shook her head. "I've been ordered by Lord Odin to assist you. To disobey would bring shame to Asgard and the name Valkyrie," the silver-haired beauty said. Shrugging, Flynn continued his trek into the area, Rosweiss right behind him. The entire neighborhood had been abandoned, with a few signs of conflict. According to Yasaka, few people lived in the area and most it was used for storage or just left empty. Flynn figured it would make sense why the demons were stationed here. They had passed a few blocks when they were attacked. Several demonic plasma bolts flew at them, all of which were blocked by Rosweiss' barrier. The same demons that had attacked the palace were charging at them, wielding various weapons formed from demonic energy. Pulling out his Gauss cannon, Flynn took aim and fired. With that one shot, several demons were torn apart from that beam. Bringing out his combat shotgun, Flynn charged while Rosweiss took the sky, forming magic circles. She targeted those who were further away from Flynn while the Doomslayer dealt with those closer. The first demon received a blast full of bullets that completely destroyed its head. Another swung a sword at Flynn, who ducked underneath the blade before kicking the demon's right knee, bending out of place. The demon roared in pain but was silenced when Flynn grabbed its head and snapped its neck. He fired an explosive round at another demon, causing it stagger as parts of its armor fell off. That gave Flynn time to ram his armored fist through its chest, killing it. Rosweiss spotted several demons readying their reapers to fire. As they fired plasma bolts, Rosweiss blocked them with a magical barrier, before firing a barrage of elemental spells. The attack killed most of the demons, but the others either formed their own barriers or dodged the Valkyrie's attacks. Two of them revealed demonic wings on their backs and then lunged at Rosweiss with spears ready to impale her. Before they could reach her, however, a gust of wind appeared and violently blew them away. Blinking in confusion, Rosweiss noticed a woman standing on top of a building near her. She was a beautiful young woman with light brown hair that was tied up, matching eyes, and wore an agent's uniform. In her right hand was a pistol while floating above her was a small hawk. Leaping past her was a handsome young man with spiked-up dyed brown hair and gray eyes. His appearance gave off the aura of a delinquent. Around his left hand was a spear covered in lightning. The man smiled as he engaged one of the demons while the woman blew forth tornadoes against two more demons. Flynn broke the bone of a demon's arm before delivering a powerful punch to their left cheek, breaking its neck. He then fired his newly required Reaper, releasing a powerful red beam that tore through the chest of a second demon. A third one rushed him with a sword, only end up being impaled by several blades coming out of its own shadow. Flynn blinked as a young man appeared beside him, carrying a scythe in his hand. Beside him was a large black dog. The man smiled. "Hi there, I'm accused Tobio. You must be Flynn Blaskus's that Lavinia-san told us about." The name Tobio said. The Doomslayer just stared at the man and his dog for a moment, before saying, "It's not dead by the way." Referring to the demon who was now getting back up, multiple holes through its body but very much alive. Tobio blinked, a bit surprised, but made no move as the dog lunged at the demon. With its sharp teeth it tore through the demon's throat with ease. The creature reminded Flynn and Little about the wolves and direwolves from Argent Nur. According to my scans, that creature is the Canis Lycaon, one of the Longinus. It is also classified as an independent avatar-type sacred gear. "How interesting," Uvega reported. At that moment, a rain of ice spears came down from the sky. They impaled several demons, tearing through their bodies with relative ease. To finish them off, multiple magic circles appeared above and fired lightning bolts, electrocuting the remaining demons, and finishing off the weakened ones. Floating in the sky on a broomstick was none other than Lavinia Rennie, now fully healed and in her usual witch outfit. Raising a wand, she let loose fireballs that killed the final living demon in the area before landing gracefully beside Flynn and Tobio. Her feet were a few inches off the ground, staying afloat thanks to her broom. "Flynn, it's so good to see you again," Lavinia said cheerfully. "Though, this might be our first time, since I was unconscious when you saved me." She mused. Flynn nodded before taking out his HAR, firing a barrage of micromissiles. They struck 2 demons and exploded, sending their parts everywhere. Good to see that you're doing okay. Lavinia smiled while adjusting her hat to cover her face, which, unknown to Flynn, was to hide the blush forming. A few minutes later the others had gathered around them. Flynn learned that the other man and woman's names were Cookie Samejima and Natsum Managawa, respectively. Like Lavinia and Tobio, they were also members of Dog and Sacred Gear Wielders. Flynn had read about them from Mephisto's file about the members when the Doomslayer wanted to learn more about the Sacred Gear Wielders. You are Tobio accused of the Grigori, Rosweiss said as she examined the 4 newcomers. Might I ask why you are here in Kyoto? Tobio raised a hand. Nothing to be suspicious about. We got wind that Flynn-san was here, and we wanted to meet him. Why me? Flynn asked, still scanning the area for any more of those demons. Well, you did save our friend here, Tobio said, pointing to Lavinia. And we wanted to meet you in person to thank you. Though, I was not expecting to see these things here, Tobio said as he looked at a corpse, surprised to see the body turning to ash. They are devils. Or rather, devils turned back into demons. They lack morality or empathy and if allowed to remain here, will kill the yokai and humans in the city, Vega explained, speaking to Team //Dog for the first time. Natsum and Cookie were surprised by the new voice, but Lavinia and Tobio were already aware of the AI thanks to Mephisto. The Predator suit sensors pinpoint their origins not too far from here. We will have to go there and remove the source before more appear. The 4 humans nodded in agreement. While the Slayer was easily able to kill the ones he fought, the others knew that these demons were powerful, at least ultimate class. There was no telling what other kind of abilities they might have. If they managed to organize a larger force, they could easily take over Kyoto. Once it was agreed that they would work together, the group made their way towards the source where the demons were coming from. Surprisingly, they ran into little resistance. With //Dog, a Valkyrie and the Doomslayer, any opposition they faced was swiftly cut down until they finally reached their destination. Said place was the largest warehouse in the oldest section of the area. Taking out his energy pistol, Flynn fired a single shot. The energy bullet struck a red wall that suddenly appeared on impact. Soon it manifested into a force field covering the entire warehouse. Lavinia hovered a little bit closer and examined it. This is a high-grade barrier. Even someone as strong as Azazel would have trouble breaking through. She looked at Rosweiss. I can get rid of it, but it will take time. Do you have any expertise in this subject? A little, Rosweiss replied. However, even with the both of us, this barrier won't come down. Not bothering to listen, Flynn walked towards the barrier. Raising a single armored fist, he released a powerful punch. The shockwave caused the others to shield their faces and even skid back a bit. From the blow, the barrier shattered like glass, unable to withstand the Slayer's strike. Quickly, Rosweiss said as she and the others looked gobsmacked at what Flynn did. Not even listening, the Slayer removed his fist, revealing the warped metal. Then with both hands he grasped both sides of the hole and with a heave, tore the door in half. The work did not even leave him worn out. Damn, Cookie said as the group entered the warehouse. Once inside they were immediately barraged by a repulsive smell. Everyone except for Flynn flinched at how strong it was. Natsum covered her nose. Oh God, what is that smell? Smells worse than laundry day at the Grigori. The source of said odor is up ahead, Vega answered. Looking towards said direction, the //Dog members and Valkyrie saw something in the center of the warehouse. There was a gore nest, the animate object's blood-red skin glowing from the large orb of demonic energy hovering a few inches above it. Around the nest were bloodstains and bits of bone and flesh. Every second it would pulse energy that sent shivers down their spines. Only the Doomslayer remained unaffected by it. What is that? Lavinia muttered. As a magician, she had a better sense when it came to feeling magical energy and sources related to it. And what she felt from the gore nest was a sensation that exceeded the rotting smell of flesh it was emitting. That is a gore nest. It is responsible for bringing the demons here. We must destroy it in order to stop the flow of demonic reinforcements, Vega said. Wait a minute. Tobio said. He approached Flynn. How do you know all this? He asked, suspicion in his voice. Flynn was silent, debating how much he should tell, when something big and red flashed past Tobio and struck the Doomslayer head-on. He just barely heard the others as he was sent crashing out of the warehouse. Doing a flip, Flynn recovered and landed on his feet, digging into the ground a little as he got into ready position and looked at his attacker. Said attacker was a large creature, roughly the same height as a baron of hell. It had a sickly purplish skin with 4 thick limbs and stubby legs, giving it the appearance of a mutated gorilla. It had a singular red eye and sharp teeth. Its back had multiple small studs sticking out. The beast roared as it banged its chest with all 4 arms. Vega? Flynn asked as he readied his combat shotgun. It is a demonized devil. However, its energy is sporadic. I believe it was originally a stray devil, Vega explained. As long as it can feel pain. Flynn replied, pumping his shotgun. With the others. Flynn! Lavinia shouted. However, they had other problems as several demonic bolts came flying down at them. The witch and Rossweiss quickly erected a combined barrier and blocked the attacks. When they brought the barrier, they saw that more of those strange devils had appeared. And with them was another person. Floating at the rear was a tall bespectacled woman with a voluptuous figure. She had tanned skin with long brown hair tied into a bun with a headset, and she had purple eyes. She wore an extremely low-cut dress, and it had a high slit which exposed a large portion of her breast. In her right hand was a staff. Well, this a surprise. The woman said in an arrogant tone. I never imagined that the Grigori would be here. Especially sending the famous / dog. Tobio frowned. You're Kateria Leviathan. A descendant of the original Leviathan. The original Leviathan? Rossweiss repeated as she looked at the woman. One of the leaders of the old Satan faction. Why are you people here in Kyoto? Kateria made a humphed sound. I have no need to tell a simple Valkyrie. But, if you must know, we simply chose this city to test out our new forces. The Reavers. She said, pointing to the demons. Reavers? Cookie repeated. Yes, devils who have been given powers of the demons of old. Their powers are on par with Ultimate-class devils and even Satan-class devils. Kateria said proudly. Though we had a few errors at the beginning, it was not a big loss as we mainly tested on strays. Kyoto seemed like a good place to see how well they fared. And if we managed to capture the leader of the Kyoto Yukai and gain control of the city's ley lines, that would be a bonus. She finished with a snap of her fingers. Immediately, the Reavers conjured their weapons, ranging from swords, spears, axes, maces, and so on. Each one pulsed with demonic energy as they prepared to attack. As one they all rushed towards the group, the intent to kill obvious. Rossweiss acted first, summoning multiple magic circles, and then firing a barrage of attacks. The Reavers conjured their own barriers, though a few were too slow and were caught in the attack. A few Reavers fired their own attacks, unleashing demonic energy bolts from either their hands or weapons, while others went in for close combat. Rossweiss and Lavinia handled the former, while the rest of / dog went to deal with the latter. Manifesting a pair of scythes, Tobio cut down several Reavers, before lunging at Kateria. The female devil immediately summoned a barrier to block the strike before firing a demonic blast at Tobio. Meanwhile Cookie impaled one Reaver with his spear before contending with another, while Natsum unleashed whirlwinds that kept several Reavers back while firing her light gun at them. It was at that moment, a second explosion destroyed another section of the warehouse, catching everyone's attention. Falling through the smoke was the injured stray devil Reaver. All of its limbs were missing, leaving bloody stumps, and it was bleeding heavily. It tried to crawl away but got nowhere as Flynn jumped on its back. Grabbing its head, he ripped out its eyeball from its socket. Sir Flynn! Rossweiss exclaimed, relieved to see the man unharmed. Neither her nor Team / dog noticed the shocked and horrified look on Kateria's face when she saw the armor. Get down! Flynn ordered as he brought out his chain gun. Spinning up the 3 barrels, he let loose a barrage of argent-infused, uranium-coated bullets. They tore through the Reavers like paper, showing just how pointless their upgrade was. 2 Reavers lunged at Flynn from the sides, one with its spear raised while the other was prepared to strike with a demonic-infused claw. They never got close. The Slayer swapped his chain gun with the super shotgun. He grabbed the armed Reaver and stopped its attack, and then aimed his weapon at the second Reaver. Firing his weapon, the Reaver's head was blown clean off. Flynn then pulled the spear out of the first Reaver's hand, and before it could react, the Doom Slayer impaled it with its own spear. Tossing the corpse aside, Flynn lunged at another Reaver. Double jumping, the Slayer grabbed the Reaver by the leg and pulled it down until they were eye level. He proceeded to deliver a powerful blow, the shockwave from the punch completely destroying the demon's head. He then threw the corpse at 2 other Reavers, knocking them to the ground. Pulling out his plasma rifle, with the heat mod already full charged, Flynn unleashed a powerful heat blast that vaporized the two Reavers and the corpse. Swapping out for the rocket launcher, the Slayer fired a barrage of rockets, detonating them once they were close to a target. The explosive projectiles plus the jagged shrapnel injured and killed many Reavers, even if they did not hit them directly. Some had brought up magical barriers, but these did little to stop the attacks. Holy shit, Cookie muttered in awe as he watched pieces falling from the air. Does he even need help? His musing was broken when a Reaver nearly skewered him with a sword. More Reavers kept pouring in, each time with the gore nest pulsing with energy. There's no end to them. Natsum exclaimed as she fired a wind-enhanced light bullet at Reaver. The gore nest is the source. We must eliminate in order to stop the flow of demonic reinforcements, Vega explained as Flynn ripped off a Reaver's arm and then bunting its head off. Flynn-san, go and take care of it. We'll keep them off you, Tobio said as he sliced the head off another Reaver. Flynn didn't acknowledge him, but already sprinted towards the gore nest. Several Reavers fired at him, but the Slayer either dodged their attacks or just let them bounce of the Predator suit. Pulling out his HAR, he fired barrage of micro-missiles. The Reavers had no time to react as the small bombs attached to their bodies, the following explosions reducing them to gore. No! Kateria yelled. She raised her staff and was about to attack but was stopped by Lavinia, who conjured spikes of ice. The devil had to fly out of the way to avoid being skewered. That gave Flynn enough time to reach the construct. Grabbing the familiar sack, the Slayer tore it off without hesitation. The warehouse was filled with an inhumane scream, causing everyone except for Flynn to pause and cover their ears. The Doom Slayer took the advantage and brought out the chain gun again. With the Reavers disoriented, they were easy picking for him. Seeing what was happening, and knowing what would happen next, Kateria immediately teleported out of there. It was that moment 3 red flashes appeared in the room. Excluding the Doom Slayer, Rossweiss and / Dog all shivered as they sensed 3 new, and powerful demonic auras. When the flash faded, it revealed 3 large demons. They were muscular and had the appearance of red goat-legged demons with curved horns pointing forward, beady green eyes that glowed with malice, and rows of sharp yellow teeth. The Barons of Hell all roared, the vibrations shaking the warehouse. Rossweiss felt her knees weaken. Being in the presence of Odin for so long as his bodyguard, she had gotten used to feeling the auras of powerful individuals. And her keen senses told her that these 3 newcomers were Satan class in devil ranking. But it was not just that. It was the pure malice they were giving off. It was unlike anything she felt before, like everything that was not them they hated, and could never let go of the rage even if they killed the source of their anger. So distracted was she that Rossweiss had no time to react when one of the Barons lunged at her. It was only thanks to Flynn was she saved from a gruesome death. The Doom Slayer performed a double jump and landed a devastated punch to the Baron's cheek, knocking the demon back. Seeing their hated foe, the other Barons also roared and moved into attack. Whipping at the Gauss cannon, Flynn fired a beam that struck one of the Barons before kicking back the third in the chest. He quickly turned around to Rossweiss, still in shock. "Wake up!" he roared. His voice snapped the Valkyrie out of her trance. "Help the others. These 3 are mine." Rossweiss was just barely getting her senses back when he said the last part. She wanted to speak against that, as it was impossible against 3 powerful creatures. But she could feel the Slayer's gaze through his visor. Swallowing, Rossweiss simply nodded before heading over to help Tobio with several Reavers. With the Valkyrie gone, Flynn turned to face the 3 Barons. The sight of old prey had the Slayer's blood pumping. The feeling of rage that had fueled him for so long was coming back in full force. At this moment everything else was unimportant. All that mattered were that there were demons, and if allowed to escape, they would cause torment to the weak. And it was the Doom Slayer's job to put them down. A simple pattern, one that Flynn was happy to oblige once more. Pulling out his super shotgun, Flynn first looked at the Baron he had sucker punched. Already getting up, it roared at the Slayer and conjured a ball of green plasma. With another roar, it threw the projectile at Flynn. The Hellwalker dodged it while rushing towards the Baron. He fired shotgun, the argent-infused bullet piercing the Baron's left knee and making the demon roar in pain this time. The other 2 Barons tried to attack the Slayer with the claws, but Flynn easily dodged them. Reaching the injured Baron, he delivered a second shot to the right knee. Reloading at the Baron was forced to use its hands to stay up, the Slayer climbed onto its back. Gripping the Baron's horns, Flynn did one strong twist, breaking the Baron's neck with a loud snap. He then used a double jump to go over the two other barons while swapping out for his rocket launcher. Switching to lock-on mode, Flynn targeted both barons. The launcher fired 6 rockets total, 3 for one baron. Said demons roared as the enhanced projectiles hit them in the back, chunks of their flesh and blood flying from the impact. One of the barons spun around just as Flynn landed and slammed its fists on the ground. It released a small wave of demonic energy that almost knocked the Slayer off his feet. Flynn managed to back up in time and continued firing his rocket, this time taking out one of the baron's horns and parts of its lower jaw. The third baron was preparing to attack. This time the Slayer pulled out his plasma rifle with the stun bomb mod. Already charged, Flynn fired a single large bolt that struck the baron head-on, the electromagnetic effect stunning it. This allowed Flynn to pull out his Gauss cannon again. Still in siege mod, Flynn charged up the weapon as the ionized gas began to condense around the magnetic projectile. Infused with argent energy, Flynn fired, releasing the plasma and projectile at once. The attack struck the wounded baron head-on, destroying most of its head and a portion of its left shoulder, sending the arm flying. As the third baron began to recover from the stun, Flynn pulled out his newest weapon, the Reaper. Raising the demonic weapon, he quick-fired 6 plasma orbs of hell energy. Each one struck the baron in the chest, causing it pain as it roared. It still managed to fire its own attack, only to miss as Flynn dodged it, returning fire. The demonic orbs that struck the demon were clearly effective, as the Baron of Hell roared in pain each time they struck. The Baron tried to knock the Slayer off his feet by slamming its fists onto the ground and unleashing another demonic wave, but Flynn merely jumped over it. Gripping the Reaper with both hands, Flynn charged it before firing a short beam of demonic energy. The beam struck the Baron right in the jaw, the impact knocking it off its feet and onto its back. Flynn then jumped on top of the Baron's chest. Raising both fists into the air, the Slayer brought them down and caved in the Baron's face, blood and gore flying everywhere. With the last Baron finally dead, Flynn turned his attention towards the others in case they needed help. Turns out it was not necessary as they were already finishing up the last of the Reavers. Deciding to help quicken pace, Flynn joined in, combat shotgun at the ready. Yasaka's palace, 1 hour later. I cannot thank you enough, Flynn-san, Roswai-san, for helping deal with this threat. Yasaka said from her spot at Flynn's left side. And the same to you as well. She added towards the 4 humans. The 3, along with Kunu, Odin, and the / dog team were presently sitting in the palace's primary meeting room. It had taken a few minutes to kill the remaining Reavers in the warehouse, but Vega had picked up several more demonic signatures throughout the district and thus extended the time it took for them to finish things up. Fortunately, their numbers were few and with help from the Yukai guards, the demons were quickly eradicated. The Doom Slayer and Rosweiss then returned to the palace with / dog team. Though Yasaka was a bit surprised to see the Grigori agents, she nevertheless welcomed them for their efforts in helping save her city. It was nothing really. Flynn did most of the fighting. I'm just glad we were able to help. Lavinia said, sitting on Flynn's right. Except for Flynn and Kunu, the former ignoring while the latter was absorbed in eating her ramen, everyone else shuddered as they could practically see the tension between the two ladies. Still, it is quite disturbing that the old Satan faction were able to sneak into Kyoto. The city is well known for its high censors. Tobio said, trying to defuse the eventual clash between two women in love. They must have used some new trick to bypass the defenses. Give them enough time to make that damn gore nest. Flynn said after taking his 8th cup of sake. He looked at Yasaka. I'm sorry we were not able to make it in time to save those people. He and Vega had explained to everyone exactly how those constructs were made. Yasaka shook her head, a sad look on her face. Do not apologize, Flynn-san. The fault lies with me. I should have been more aware of what was going on. I am just happy that no permanent damage was done. I got worried when I sensed 3 strong presence appear out of nowhere. She was referring to the summoning of the 3 Barons of Hell. They weren't that strong, Flynn said, having fought thousands of them in the past. Odin snorted. I think we have different views on not strong. Those auras were the equivalent of Satan class. Even I would have some trouble against so many strong beings. Well, the good thing is that they're gone, Tobio said. I'll be sure to let Azazel know of this development. The old Satan faction has targeted the Grigori in the past. And with these Reavers, we might be seeing more acts from them. Vatican, Italy. Michael was standing in the private chambers of the Pope. Facing him were 3 people, all women. The two younger ones wore white hooded cloaks over their bodies. Zenobia Corda had chin-length blue hair with a single bang dyed green and brown eyes. She had a large object wrapped in cloth hanging over her shoulders. Irina Shidu had violet eyes and long chestnut hair tied into twintails held by a blue scrunchie each. The final woman, the oldest of them, was Griselda Corda, Zenovia's guardian. Unlike the two girls, she wore a nun habit, but you could still see strands of blonde hair that did little to obscure her blue eyes. Normally the Pope would also be present, but at the moment he had to work with the other high officials in sorting the current mess. The same reason why Michael had summoned these three. "Thank you for coming on such short notice, Griselda," Michael said politely. The nun bowed, followed by the two young girls. "Please, think nothing of it, Lord Michael. We are always happy to answer your summons. I can only assume that this has to do with the current crisis." "You are correct, Griselda. As you know, 3 of the Excalibur shards have been stolen. Our sources have traced them to Kuo, which is currently under the devil control of the Gremory and Citri houses. In addition, we have evidence that the thief is Kokobile, one of the Grigori's cadre," Michael explained. Griselda frowned internally. As one of the Vatican's strongest female exorcists, she was capable of facing against ultimate-class devils. However, someone like Kokobile, a veteran from the Great War, was another story. She would ask why only she and her charges were being sent on this mission, but the fact that they were heading towards devil territory explained that sending anyone else might seem like an act of aggression. "What are orders then, Lord Michael?" "You are to head towards Kuo and retrieve the shards. But first you must speak with the devil heiresses and let them know of the situation. While I doubt that they would be involved with this, please inform them that you mean no harm unless they attack first, in that it is merely self-defense. In addition, you have one other assignment," Michael said before summoning a holographic image. Griselda and the girls watched as the image showed none other than Flynn Blaskowicz. "This young man is reported to be living in Kuo. He is human, and the only other piece of information we have is that he is under the care of Mephistopheles," Michael explained. "He recently defeated the third son of the Phoenix clan, Riser, in a one-on-one match. He is to be regarded as extremely dangerous and avoided at all cost. However, in the event you should encounter Blaskowicz, try and approach him peacefully. If possible, try and gain his assistance in recovering the shards. But, if he becomes hostile, flee immediately, do not fight him, and do not worry about recovering the shards. Understood?" Michael said, putting emphasis on the last part that left no room for arguments. Zenobia looked like she wanted to say something, but look from Griselda silenced her. "Understood, Lord Michael. In the name of the Father, we will not fail you." Unknown location. Loud cackling could be heard from inside a dimly lit room. The only thing that could be seen was a round black table with demonic markings on it that glowed an angry red. 4 people could be seen sitting there, one of them Kateria. The Leviathan descendant glared at the source of the laughter. "Be silent, Rizavim. I have not patience for it." Rizavim Livan Lucifer, son of the original Lucifer, had the appearance of a middle-aged man in his 40s with long dark silver hair, a beard, and hazel eyes. He wore the same Satan Lucifer attire as Surzex, although colored in silver. The man's laughter began to die down, but he still had a mocking grin on his face. "Oh, come on Kateria-chan. After all that confidence and swagger that your plan would work, only to fail big time, you have to admit it's funny," Rizavim said as he wiped a tear from his eye. Kateria wanted to snap back, but a third voice cut her off. Peeking out from the shadows was a handsome man dressed in black armor with a cape. He had long brown hair that goes to his hips with many bangs covering his right eye. This was Shalba Beelzebub, a descendant of the original Beelzebub. Despite Rizavim's words, he has a point. The Reavers were supposed to be a secret weapon when we finally strike against the false Satans. If Grigori agents were there, and if Yasaka survived, they will no doubt bring this to the attention of Surzex and the others. They will only crack down harder on us. "Oh, please. They have done nothing to impede us since they won the war. And they still don't know our true plans," Kateria said with a huff. "And we can make plenty of more Reavers once we fully complete the research." "True, but don't forget that only 1 out of 10 devils can be turned into a Reaver so far," the descendant of Asmodeus, Cruzuri Asmodeus, added. He had long black hair tied up into a ponytail, violet eyes, pale skin, and pointy ears. He wore attire of a noble, consisting black clothes, with dark red belts and motifs and a cape. The rest just become mutants or die. "Humph, then we can just get more low-class devils. Better yet, we can just pick up a few more strays. No one will care about them if they go missing. Kateria stated with a smirk. Only for the smirk to turn into a frown when Ryzovim spoke. Oh yeah, I can see it now. This just in. Stray devils are disappearing at a remarkable rate. Is this the work of exorcists? Are they dying off? Or is it some nefarious purpose? That will definitely keep people from getting suspicious. Good thinking, Kateria. Ryzovim said, ending with a loud laugh. That seemed to have been the final straw, as Kateria looked ready to attack. Before she could, however, the markings on the table began to glow brighter, illuminating the entire room. Then a dark, deep voice spoke, coming from everywhere. Silence. That one word had the four devils standing up from their chairs. They then got one knee and lowered their heads towards the table. Even Ryzovim had lost his previous humor, now showing a serious expression. My lord, we had not expected contact from you so soon. Shalba said respectfully. Your actions on earth has not gone unnoticed, Kateria Leviathan. The Dark Lord said in a disappointing tone. Said descendant flinched as the nameless one continued. Still, now we know that he is indeed active once more. But, only at half strength. You need not worry, my lord. We're already preparing countermeasures for him as we speak. Kruzuri said confidently. If they could see his face, they would know that the Dark Lord did not sound convinced. We shall see. Does the Ouroboros suspect anything? No, sir. Ophis remains oblivious to our plans. As are the other members of the Cows Brigade. We have made sure of that. Kateria reported. And what of the Angel of Stars? Is your agent still among his forces? The Dark Lord asked. Shalba nodded. Yes, O Great One. Kokobeel doesn't even suspect a thing. When the time comes, he will act, and we shall have the shards. Good. The shards of the ancient Argenta blade will prove useful. The Dark Lord commented. Do not fail me again, descendants of traitors. Or there will be no more room for redemption. We will not fail you, master. Ryzovim said as the light died down. England, Pendragon Mansion. In the study room of the Pendragon home was Uther Pendragon, current head of the family. Middle-aged with short blonde hair, blue eyes, fair skin, a lean muscular build and wearing a noble outfit, he was brimming elegance. Presently, the man had a focused look on his face as he sat in a chair, reading a book that was based on the history of the Pendragon family, at least the public one known to even the supernatural world. This information was only shared among his family and those of the other Knights of the Round Table. The reason being was due to recent events, all starting with from a certain devil raiding game. Said events had Uther making calls with various people, primarily those who were a part of the other noble houses of Britain, and even the British royal family. All of whom were well connected with the existence of the supernatural world, a rare trait as most human governments are oblivious to the reality that gods, devils and angels were real. In either case, questions were being asked, information was being collected and shared, but everything had come to the same conclusion: the past had come calling. And for that reason, Uther had requested his wayward children to come home. As if responding to his thoughts, a knock at the door snapped him back to reality. Enter, Uther said, still reading the book. Entering were three people. The first person was a young woman in her early 20s with long black hair tied above her head and wore a maid outfit. Next was a man who looked like a younger version of Uther. Except he wore glasses, and his blonde hair was longer, with a strand across his face, and a ponytail over his left shoulder. He was also wearing a business suit. Behind him was a young girl with a slim body, shoulder-length blonde hair and blue eyes. She wore a sorceress-like dress with a huge blue hat with a black bow and yellow stars and matching cape with pink flowers and a white interior. Arthur Pendragon, his eldest child and heir, had run away some time ago. Uther knew that it was to protect his lover Elaine Westcott, the maid who had just guided them, and the mentor of his daughter Lefay Pendragon. The same maid who had knocked on the door. Lefay had also followed her brother to make sure Arthur would not get into any trouble. My lord. Lord Arthur and Lady Lefay have arrived. Elaine announced with a neutral tone. Thank you, Elaine. You may leave us. Uther said as he put his book down. The maid nodded and then left, but not before giving Arthur one discreet glance, which the young man returned, before closing the door. The heir looked back at his father, a blank expression on his face. Lefay's face showed both delight in seeing her father again, as well as nervousness of what might happen in this meeting. Uther walked towards his children, stopping a respective distance. Both father and son stared at one another for a minute, looking for any changes or other anomalies worth noticing. It was Uther, though, who broke the silence. "It's been a while. Are you doing well?" Uther asked his son. "I am fine. I have joined a group of comrades who are both strong and reliable," Arthur said evenly. "As reliable as terrorists can be," Uther commented, earning a look from Arthur. The older Pendragon looked at his daughter. His facial expression softened, and his tone became kinder. "And what about you, Le Fay? Still keeping up with your studies?" Le Fay nodded happily. "Ah yes. I made sure not to get rusty and kept brother safe. I even learned a few new spells too." "That's good. I'm sure your mother will be happy to know," Uther said. "Speaking of which, she will be home in an hour or so. You two should stay for dinner. Let her know how you're both doing." "Why are we here, father?" Arthur cut Uther off abruptly. Le Fay shot him a warning look, but he ignored it. "We have not spoken since we left, and now you suddenly send a message for us to come home because of some great importance." Uther sighed at his son's impatience, though he could not blame him. "Very well. To be frank, I know why you left, Arthur, and who you are trying to protect." The revelation made Arthur twitch but said nothing. "Given recent events, however, I am willing to approve of your union with Ms. Westcott, and eventually marry her." Le Fay gasped in shock, putting a hand over her mouth. Arthur's only show of surprise was his eyes widen a bit, his posture becoming less stiff. Still, he kept a suspicious gaze on his father. "And you expect me to believe that? The other families will clearly protest against that," Arthur said, referring to the other families of the Round Table Knights. "Actually, they're fine with it. As is Her Majesty," Uther said, once again surprising his children. "The current situation requires all of us to be united. In addition, Ms. Elaine has already proven to be a skilled magician since she trained your sister. She will make a great addition to the Pendragon family." Arthur studied his father, trying to find any signs of deceit. When he found none, he let out a sigh. "Very well, what do you want me to do?" he asked. Uther gave a small smile, happy his son agreed. "First is to read this." He reached behind the chair and pulled out something before placing it on the nearby coffee table for the siblings to see. It was a tome, a large tome about the size of Uther's chest. The cover was a grayish cover while the binding had blue-green stripes on it. It was clearly old but appeared to be in pristine condition. Uther then bit his right thumb and drew some blood to his children's shock. He then placed said thumb on the center of the cover. Immediately a familiar symbol glowed red, followed by a magic circle appearing. "This," Le Fay murmured as she studied the circle. "I've never seen a circle like this. It's not a devil, angel, Norse, Greek or any of the symbols I know of. I don't even recognize the letters. And the magic feels old and powerful." The young magician was filled with curiosity of where this came from. The Pendragon head said nothing as the circle disappeared, but the symbol remained. "This book has been in our family since the beginning. This was shown to me by my father, and his father before and so on." He looked at Arthur. "This tells the true history of the Pendragon name. Trained to Kuo." Flynn had spent the night at Kyoto. Though the major threat had gone, he and Vega decided to stay to ensure there weren't any lingering demons. Vega had also taken the time to catalog the Reavers into the Codex. Neither Yasaka nor Kunu seemed to mind, and the young QB took the time to give Flynn a proper tour of Kyoto once he was done. It was nice to see children smiling and having fun. Flynn had almost forgotten what that was like since his last family. Now he was on a train heading back to Kuo. Normally, he would have Vega used to the tether system to teleport back to the town, or at least ride his bike he had stored in his suit's hammer space. But the time on the train gave Flynn time to think. There were many issues he needed to think about. The first issue was the obvious one: the demons were back. It was clear that Hell was working with the old Satan faction, though it was just as possible that they were using them. According to Mephisto, they were led by the descendants of the original Satans, in other words the 4 archdemons the Slayer did not kill before being sealed, and who had betrayed the Dark Lord. The group consisted of devils who were dissatisfied with the current regime in the underworld. Naturally, that could mean they had supporters within said government, like officials and nobles. Still, they might have others helping them. Cultists, for example. Human cultists, possibly magicians, who received the same false deal of power or granting them their ultimate desires. Then there were those Reavers. According to Vega, they were devils re-demonized by Hell energy. He said they were around the same strength as an ultimate class devil, which would mean they were around the same level as a Hell Knight perhaps. Nothing difficult, and yet Flynn could not shake this feeling that they were meant to become something more. Then there was this other situation. Before leaving, Tobio had told Flynn that some members in Grigori were attempting to restart conflict between the three factions. The mastermind was Kokobil, one of the cadre, the leaders of Grigori and a veteran of the last war. The guy was a warmonger. He had been unsatisfied with how the war ended, feeling that the fallen angels could have won if they kept fighting. Guess he was now going to use this chance to infiltrate Kuo, where two sisters of two Satans were located, bringing the shards of Excalibur to lure in heaven to restart the war. Tobio explained that the last time agents of Grigori were in the town, they could not make any rash movements. Thus, he was asking Flynn to help with the matter, as a neutral. Though Kokobil had power equal to a Satan-class devil, Tobio was confident that Flynn could handle him. That led to the final problem: Flynn was weak. To be exact, he was missing at least half of his power. Flynn theorized he could easily defeat Ophis, but it would be nigh impossible to defeat one of the archdemons. He had his suspicions when he first awoke on Mars, but did not really put much thought into it due to the whole invasion. Now though, with time on his hands, Flynn could tell. The most obvious evidence was his current form. When he was put into the divinity machine, he was between his early to mid-20s, and had not changed since. Perhaps losing 50% of his power was the reason for his appearance as a teenager, which was how old he was when he first entered Hell, before arriving on Argent Nur. When he told Vega, the AI hypothesized that when the demons sealed him, they must have taken half of his power in order to ensure that he would remain sealed. However, he could not predict what happened with said half, though it is likely that the demons were attempting to weaponize it. That made Flynn uneasy. It would be a real bitch fighting against something with half his power. Though, they would have already used such a thing if they did. And when he tried to remember what happened at that time. Half-conscious, the Slayer struggled against the Hellborns who held him as he was chained down by hell-forged metal. His armor already removed and sealed separately, and his super shotgun, the diabolical musket, taken away. As he was placed into the sarcophagus, Flynn glared up at the treacherous hell priests who stood above him, their pale, decrepit faces filled with smugness. They then began performing a ritual, and with his consciousness fading him, he felt something leave him. The last thing he saw before darkness took him were 7 heads and several bestial roars. The only other question was why Flynn looked as he did now. Vega had a theory for that too. Argent energy was known for having various effects, one of which was affecting one's mortality. It could extend one's lifespan, as Flynn was a primary example as he lived for eons without aging. The tether system, combined with half his power missing, must have caused Flynn to regain his youth. That would also affect his combat abilities to degree, such as reaction time and reach of limbs. That explained why Flynn could not react in time when that stray attacked him in Kuo, or when he failed to kill Freed immediately. Perhaps when he regained the rest of his power, he would return to his original form. At least then he wouldn't have to pretend of being a student. Flynn was snapped from his musings when the announcement came that they were approaching Kuo. He got up and stretched after sitting for so long. The location of his remaining power would have to wait until he dealt with this situation with the fallen angels. If they were planning for something, it might involve humans, and he could not allow that. Eventually exiting the train, Flynn headed home right away. By then the sun was already starting to go down. When he arrived home, he half expected Kuroka to try to glomp, but surprisingly it did not happen. Instead, there was only Tiamat. "Welcome back, Master." The Chaos Karma Dragon greeted. Flynn gave a hum as he took off his coat and shoes. "Where did Kuroka go?" he asked as he made his way to the fridge. "She decided to spend some time with her sister," Tiamat answered. "However, 3 exorcists arrived in town yesterday. They met with the devils this afternoon. Kuroka told me that they were basically telling the devils to stay out of the affair. Then a fight broke out between Drake's host and the knight against 2 of the exorcists when one of them threatened the Argento girl. In short, they were defeated, and the knight ran off. However, the part one did notice was that the older exorcist was asking the devils questions about you." Flynn raised an eyebrow while pulling out a can of beer. "Why me?" "I don't know. Perhaps heaven learned of you when Mephisto broadcasted that fight with the Phoenix boy," Tiamat said. "That is a strong possibility. The higher-ranked angels might recognize who you are, Blaskowicz. While I recommend that we maintain a peaceful coexistence with the Church, we should prepare for possible confrontation," Vega advised. Flynn growled. Of course, what other reason could there be? Perhaps that was Mephisto's plan all along. He sighed as he went to go take a shower. I missed the days when all I had to focus on was my next kill. He muttered. Next day. Today was a weekend, meaning no school. Not that Flynn would go in anyway. With the threat of Kokobile and the possibility of a second war started, there was work to be done. Vega had already been monitoring local communications, both human and supernatural, and had detected multiple areas where forces loyal to Kokobile were. Consisting of stray exorcists and fallen angels, these would have to be put down. Both to ensure that they would not be a threat later and so that Flynn could learn where the cadre was. Vega had advised attacking the locations that were farther away from the more populated areas. And with Tiamat and Kuroka's magic, they would be able to avoid attention. But as Flynn was getting ready to move, there was a knock at the door. Tiamat, who was wearing her signature dark blue leather jacket and pants, went to get it, and they were slightly surprised to see that it was the senior exorcist that Tiamat had mentioned. The woman bowed her head. Greetings. My name is Griselda Corda, an exorcist of the church. You must be Flynn Blaskowicz, she said politely. I am, Flynn said, walking past Tiamat to stand in front of Griselda. What exactly are you doing here? He asked abruptly. Not put off by Flynn's bluntness, Griselda answered. May I come in first? Tiamat looked at Flynn, who only gave a slow nod. The nun entered as Tiamat closed the door behind her. She didn't bother to sit as time was of the essence and got right to speaking. No doubt you've already heard from the Dragon King that myself and my subordinates have come to this town to retrieve the Excalibur shards. As such, I have come here with a proposition for us to work together to resolve this issue. Flynn raised an eyebrow. He studied the nun for a few seconds before asking. According to Mephisto, the church had no clue about Urdak, the greater whole of heaven, or the Makers. Even the angels that they were affiliated with had no idea what the Khan Maker was doing. Still, that did not mean Flynn was going to lower his guard. And why would you come to me? And speaking of your subordinates, where are they? He asked. I had my students scout the town. I gave them strict orders to not engage any fight without contacting me first. Griselda answered with a tone. She was clearly displeased of how Zenobia acted when she threatened to kill Asia. As to why I approach you, your match against the Phoenix has shown that you are highly skilled. And as you are not aligned with any faction, you are essentially a neutral party and an outsider. Judging by how you and the Chaos Karma Dragon are preparing for battle, you clearly wish to stop Kokobile. And thus, you wish to form a temporary alliance. Tiamat summarized. Exactly. To be honest, this mission was extremely reckless. Lord Michael himself and His Holiness also believed that sending just myself and my wards was not enough. Kokobile is a cadre for good reason. Unfortunately, politics prevented us from sending someone more appropriate for the situation. Griselda. But, with you and Tiamat, I believe we have a better chance of stopping the fallen angel and preventing another great war. Vega spoke to Flynn. According to the information I gathered, Griselda Corda is one of Church's most skilled female exorcists. In addition, she shows maturity and a logical understanding of the situation. Her assistance would be useful. Flynn had to begrudgingly agree. Having been trained by the Night Sentinels and after fighting so long, he had developed a sixth instinct that could tell if someone was skilled enough. Fine, you can work with us. But you'll be going with Tiamat while I head towards a different location. I don't trust people from the three factions, not until I can learn more about them. Flynn said in a tone that left no room for negotiations. Griselda bowed her head. I can accept that. It will be a pleasure to work with you, Lady Tiamat. Yes. Let us do our best. Tiamat said, trying to not sound depressed. She was hoping to work with Master and take this chance to show her skills. And unfortunately, a certain yokai took that chance to appear. In her cat form, Kuroka landed gracefully on Flynn's shoulder. Griselda didn't miss the look of jealousy on Tiamat's face as the dragon glared at the Nico. Nya. Then I'll go with Flynn Kuan. Kuroka exclaimed while rubbing her head against the Slayer's cheek. Flynn said nothing. While he was annoyed with Kuroka's constant affection, he knew she would be useful. A lot of the hideouts were near populated areas. Her magic would help ward off curious bystanders and ensure that the ordinary humans would be none the wiser. The only real problem was extracting information from the stray exorcists and fallen angels. Holding his punches was not a strong suit of Flynn's. Still, it couldn't be that hard, right? And now he could finally cut loose. Base 1. Flynn slammed a fallen angel hard on the floor face first. He then delivered a barrage of soft punches to their face. Where's Kokobile? He roared as an exorcist tried to stab Flynn with a light sword. The blade merely bounced off his armor, making the stray priest lose his balance. That allowed Flynn to grab it and use it to stab the exorcist through the stomach. Behind him a second exorcist appeared and fired an assault rifle at the slayer. Just like with the blade, the bullets bounced harmlessly off his armor. It was only when the bullets stopped flying did Flynn toss the corpse of the first stray exorcist to the floor. He slowly turned his head towards the second priest, making said person back up. "Where's Kokobile?" Flynn asked as he began walking towards his third victim menacingly. Base 2. When Flynn destroyed the wall, the occupants of the base had been watching a female wrestling game. The leader was the sole fallen angel with 4 wings who was sitting at the front. Not that it did much, as the moment Flynn brought out his chain gun in turret mode, the group had been gunned down in seconds. The fallen angel's right wings had been torn to pieces, making him lose his momentum as he tried to escape and hit the floor hard. The slayer made his way over as the fallen tried to get up. Gritting his teeth, the man formed a light sword and tried to attack Flynn. But his moments were too slow, and Flynn easily stopped the attack by grabbing the fallen angel's wrist. With a swift twist the arm snapped in half. Flynn ignored the fallen angel's cries of pain as he pulled out his energy pistol. "Don't make me ask twice," Flynn said as he pointed the weapon's barrel at the fallen's forehead. "Where is Kokobile?" He had to ask twice. Base 3. "Where's Kokobile?" Flynn demanded as he jumped down a flight of stairs, firing his super shotgun at a stray exorcist. The blast blew their head off. Flynn landed on the floor with a thud, smacking aside another exorcist with his left arm, sending them crashing into the wall. He then pulled out his plasma gun and fired at oncoming enemies. The plasma bolts easily tore through them except for the last group at the back with the base leader. Charging, Flynn fired a heat blast that incinerated the group but left the leader with only burns. Said person did not have time to recover as Flynn grabbed him by the collar and threw him through a door, crashing into a desk. "Where the fuck is Kokobile?" Flynn demanded as he grabbed the man by the back of his head. He dragged him over to a closet door before dropping him, so his head was near where the door met the wall. Then, without warning, Flynn began slamming the door against the leader's head, asking the same question, pronouncing the words with each slam. "Where is Kokobile?" Base 4. This next base was interesting, as all the members were girls. "Where's Kokobile?" Flynn demanded as he threw a girl against some boxes. The blow clearly rattled her as she looked up at the Doomslayer with an unfocused face. Nevertheless, she was able to gasp. "No, please." Flynn ignored her pleading. "Suck it up. I doubt this isn't the first time you got rough-handled," Flynn said in a tone that sounded both serious and mocking as he made his way towards her. Suddenly another female stray exorcist pounced on Flynn from behind, trying to stab the slayer with a knife. "Ack, little fucking spider monkey," Flynn yelled as he threw the bitch off. He then looked at the first female exorcist and pulled out his energy pistol, causing the woman to flinch. "Seriously, the innocent look is not going to work," Flynn declared as he prepared to shoot. "I've killed plenty of females just as I've killed males. This is by no means being sexist," he said as he raised the pistol, ignoring the woman's pleading as he prepared to shoot. Base 5. These exorcists do not appear to possess omni-language like supernatural beings do. Many of them in this base appear to be of Hispanic ethnicity, Vega said as Flynn delivered a haymaker into one exorcist and sending them crashing into another. "Donde está Kokobile?" Flynn yelled, taking Vega's advice as shot a fallen angel in the face with his super shotgun. Base 6. The next base was underneath an ice rink of all places. While it was run by normal human beings, said humans were under a hypnosis spell so that they were unaware of the stray exorcists and fallen angels using it as a hideout. However, right now it was nighttime and there was no one there except Kokobile's followers, the Doomslayer and Kuroka. Which was obvious given the path of bloody corpses lingering in the hallway. The base's leader, a fallen angel, was now crawling across the rink. His wings had been shot off and he was bleeding quite a bit with a trail of blood coming up behind him. Speaking of behind, approaching the dying fallen angel was Flynn driving on a Zamboni, with Kuroka happily riding on it in her cat form. Cackling, Flynn managed to yell out, You're about to be killed by a Zamboni." To be honest, this was not his usual style. He would rather go in and massacre them all in seconds. But, after the weeks of being stuck in a teenager body, having to go to school with demons, the whole shit with the Phoenix brat, he needed to just let loose. Combined with the joy of finally going on a slaughter spree, killing those who would harm others after so long, Flynn was feeling rather refreshed. And Kuroka was enjoying herself too, apparently, from the laughing. Flynn began to wonder if his new life was affecting him. In either case, now tell me where your fucking boss is or you're gonna die. In 5 minutes. Needless to say, the Slayer got a little out of hand after finally causing endless slaughter after so long. Though he felt more relaxed now. Underworld, Lilith. Meanwhile, another important event was happening. The city Lilith, named after the wife of the original Lucifer, was the new capital of the Devil Society after the Civil War 500 years ago, when the descendants of the original Satans were driven from power. It was also ruled by Surzek's Lucifer, one of the 4 current leaders of the Devil faction. Thousands of devils were moving about, carrying out their usual activities, whether they be high, mid or low class. However, presently there was an important meeting going on. In the building that served as the heart of the Devil government, where Surzek's normally was, a gathering of the council state was taking place. These devils present were all leaders of their respective clans, the pillars that had survived the Great War and the Civil War. Also included were individual devils of great importance and influence. Not just including the 4 great Satans, but also Zekrom Baal, first head of the Baal clan and one of the few oldest living devils. As for the topic that called the leaders together, it regarded a certain sword. Why didn't the church or heaven notify us beforehand of their representatives coming to Kuo in search for the Excalibur shards? Zeoticus Gremory asked. As his daughter was currently living in said town, he was naturally worried. The Pope said that they did not want the news that they were robbed of some of their prized weapons to get out so quickly. Surzek said, having recovered enough to take part in meetings like this. Or rather, his wife forced him to rather than let him spend time with their son. We're keeping a team on standby in case things go south. Either they will reinforce Kuo's defense or if necessary, bring my sister, Sona Citri and their servants here for their safety. How can we even be sure that Heaven and Grigori are not working together? This would be an excellent chance for them to strike. Lord Amon commented. Falbium shook his head. Doubtful. According to the reports, several guards were killed in the theft of the Excalibur shards. In addition, both Michael and Azazel hate conflict, and like us, they don't have the numbers to restart a war. This was done by a few individuals going off the radar, led by the cadre Kokabeel. There were a couple of mumbles. Many knew about said fallen angel and his warmongering ways. Have we heard anything from the Grigori? Asked Lord Agars, head of the Agars clan. Surely they must be doing something to track down one of their own. We got word from Lord Shemhazai that Kokabeel is currently in hiding after stealing the shards, along with several fallen angels and a dozen or so stray exorcists. They're trying to find them, but right now they lack the manpower. Most of their forces are focused on other matters. Seraphal reported. Most of the time, Seraphal Leviathan would be cheerful and upgoing. But when times like these came, the devil in charge of foreign affairs got serious. Other matters? It must be important if they are not entirely focused on one of their leaders going rogue. Lord Citri said to his daughter. Apparently, a team of theirs ran into trouble in Kyoto while a group from the Norse faction was visiting on a friendly meeting. Seraphal explained. Kyoto? Repeated Lord Astaroth. So you're saying that something happened with the Yukai? It was a Juka who answered. No, whatever it was, it had the team working alongside them, as well as affiliates of Asgard. They're keeping it a secret right now, but we do know that the human Flynn Blaskowicz was also involved in it. He finished, knowing full well what everyone's reactions would be at the mention of that name. A tense silence filled the room. The mere name of that person caused the mood to drop. While humans defeating devils is nothing new, most of those devils were weak, either low-class or strays, sometimes mid-class. Of course, there were individuals who could defeat stronger devils, but they were either powerful magicians, exorcists, holy and/or demon sword wielders or sacred gear possessors. So, the fact that an unknown human, using only his fists and human-made weapons, was able to defeat a high-class devil like Riser Phoenix was infuriating for the more prideful members of their race. Especially of how quick it was, worse, almost the entire supernatural world had been watching. That would put the next generation of devils in a bad light. Lord Phoenix, Riser's father, was also a bit conflicted. While he had wanted his son's ego to be taken down and learned some humility, that the clan's trademark immortality was not invincible, the outcome of the match had a much different effect. Riser had gained an immense fear of Flynn and due to Issei's influence, of dragons too. The young man would not leave his room unless necessary and would mostly hide under his blanket too. Lord Phoenix and his wife were deeply worried for Riser and their daughter. Ravel had also been traumatized from how brutal Flynn dispatched the rest of the peerage, most of whom were still recovering, even with the aid of Phoenix tears. It was like something was slowing down the effects. While I know that this is an important matter we must attend to, I have to ask what our next course of action with Flynn Blazkowicz is? Questioned Lord Furfur. The Satans looked at one another, with Surzex secretly looking at Zekrom. The old devil shared a quick nod as the Lucifer answered. It's been decided that we will merely observe him. Both I and Seraphol have ordered our siblings to keep track of Blazkowicz's movements. The bit of news did little to settle the matter. In fact, some seemed to disapprove. Especially the current heads of the Gremory and Citri families. They looked at their eldest children in shock and then at Zekrom, knowing he had a hand in this. But before they could speak, someone beat them to it. This is nonsense. A voice shouted, getting everyone's attention. Looking, the source was Lord Bale, the current head of the Bale clan. The man had a bottle of hellfire wine next to him as he looked around in contempt. Have the four great Satans fallen so low that they resort to spying? He mockingly asked. Surzex and the others said nothing while some of the heads glared at Lord Bale. Said Devil continued. I won't deny that this boy is skilled. However, you can't forget that there are other skilled humans too. Vasco Strata being a prime example. Everyone shivered at the mention of the current cardinal priest, an exorcist whom even Surzex and Ajuka feared back when the man was in his prime. But unlike Strata, this Blazkowicz is alone, barring the Chaos Karma Dragon. If he is such a threat, then just kill him. Zekrom glared at his descendant. It's not that simple. He is a foe we cannot approach carelessly. Like hell he is. Lord Bale exclaimed, shooting up from his chair. Slamming both his hands on the table, he continued. The human managed to defeat Riser Phoenix and seriously wound Surzex Lucifer with a single punch. While the former is not a concern, news of the latter has already started to spread among our own people and even to the other factions. Do you have any idea what it does to our reputation? Especially when said devil possesses the mighty power of destruction? He pointed an indignant finger at Surzex. He then pointed at Zekrom. And don't think I've forgotten about you, great king. Ever since this human made his appearance, you've been acting nervous. Like something was going to pounce on you. Why are you so afraid of him? He's just a fucking human. The room went silent when Lord Bale finished ranting. A few of the clan heads were not surprised. Lord Bale had always been known for being prideful, even for a member of his family. He scorned both his sons for being failures in his eyes. In addition, he was always angered that his clan's power had spread outside the clan within Surzex and Rias. However, they were a bit stunned of how openly Lord Bale spoke out against Zekrom. He had always been subservient to the first Bale, seeking his counsel before ever making a decision. So, this outburst was new. As for said devil, Zekrom gave no response. He kept a cool gaze on his descendant, his hands clasped in front of him. After what felt like an eternity, the old devil got up and calmly made his way over towards Lord Bale. His footsteps made loud echoes throughout the chamber. No one spoke as Zekrom finally reached Lord Bale, said devil starting to become a bit unnerved. And then, before anyone could even blink, Zekrom grabbed Lord Bale by the back of his head and slammed his face onto the table hard. The impact made everyone jump in surprise, even the Satans. But Zekrom was not done as he pulled Lord Bale up. The clan head's nose was broken, and blood was coming out. Zekrom followed it up with a strong punch to the stomach, causing Lord Bale to keel over. Getting on his knees, he threw up a bit as he tried to breathe. Zekrom paid him no heed. Nor the looks from the other heads or Satans. Instead, he calmly poured himself a glass of wine and took a strong sip. Letting out a loud sigh, Zekrom spoke in a calm, low tone and yet everyone could hear him. He is a predator. Our predator, long before any one of you were born. I still bear the scars the last time I crossed paths with him. He could probably kill the 4 Satans with a pen. He looked down at his descendant, who by now had lost his bravado. That fucking human is the Doom Slayer. Kuo Town. The sun had already started to go down as Griselda and Tiamat exited a building. It had been abandoned for some time and was perfect for Kokobil's forces to camp out. Their numbers were small, with only one fallen angel whom Tiamat took care of swiftly while Griselda interrogated the stray exorcists. A few minutes later the 2 women were making their way out of the building. The same thing. They receive their orders through others, but never meet Kokobil directly. He must have a select few who accompany him. Griselda summarized. It's clear that this method was to ensure that he would not be found until he wanted to be. By then he will probably have already started whatever he had in mind. Tiamat said as she adjusted her leather coat. I hope Master is having better luck than we are. Griselda was silent as the Chaos Karma Dragon mentioned Flynn. She still recalled Lord Michael's orders before she and her wards had left for Kuo. Lady Tiamat, what can you tell me about Flynn Blazkowicz? Griselda asked. Tiamat stopped walking, turning around to give her a suspicious stare. Why are you asking? Sensing the protective tone in the dragon's voice, Griselda reassured. I am merely curious. Before coming here, Lord Michael gave us specific instructions regarding Mr. Blazkowicz. And what were those orders? Tiamat asked, curious. That we are to, at best, avoid him, and at worst approach him with no hostility. The best situation was to try and work out a compromise with him in retrieving the Excalibur shards. Griselda explained. It was one of the reasons why she approached Flynn on her own, not able to trust Zenobia and Irina from doing something stupid. Though their devotion to God was commendable, like many exorcists and church members, the girls possessed a black and white view of the world. Tiamat raised an eyebrow. That's it? He did not say anything else? Tiamat asked. Griselda shook her head. No. When I asked for specifics on just what or who Flynn Blazkowicz was, Lord Michael remained silent. I could tell, though, that it was a rough subject. The nun said, but with a hint of annoyance. Tiamat supposed that made sense. The leaders of the three factions would probably do everything they could to ensure no information about the Doomslayer, Hel, Urdak, the Makers, Argent Dnur, the Night Sentinels or the Wraiths was leaked. Such a revelation could possibly bring down the fragile peace they had built. Sighing, Tiamat replied. It's not my place to speak of my master. That is his choice, but I can say this, he is someone not to be trifled with. If he so desired, my master could wipe out all three factions. The last part surprised Griselda. The entire three factions? Surely you jest, Lady Tiamat. While I admit that Mr. Blazkowicz gives off a powerful aura, not even he could do such a thing. Even other powerful figures from the other factions would have difficulty in accomplishing such a task. She was taken aback by the low chuckle from the Chaos Karma Dragon. Oh, if only you knew. Tiamat said as she calmed herself down. Look at like this. My master is a disaster with its own will. It cannot be stopped, it cannot be tamed, and it cannot be outrun. No matter what you do, he will eventually find you. He is inevitable. Griselda frowned at her words. But she could hear the conviction in the dragon's words, and it concerned her that such a being was living in this town. The only other people she could think of that could completely destroy the three factions were the two strongest beings in the world. But, before she could press further, there was an explosion. The two looked towards the same direction in surprise, as a few miles away smoke could be seen rising up into the night sky. With Issei. Oh great. President is going to kill me. Issei thought as he tried to catch up with the damn handsome knight of Gremory. And then there was Zenobia who was swinging that huge holy sword and sending any object in front of her flying. He was beginning to regret bringing her and Irina into the plan. The whole thing started yesterday when the representatives from the church came. Things went smoothly at first until the blue-haired girl, Zenobia, began insulting Asia due to her previous titles as the Holy Maiden and now being a witch and a devil. That really angered Issei, but what made him snap was when Zenobia tried to kill Asia just because she still believed in God. An argument broke out that somehow turned into a duel between Zenobia and Irina against Issei and Kiba. Issei had already been made aware of Kiba's pass towards Excalibur by Rias, where he and several orphans had been experimented on and then disposed of by the now stray priest Valper Galilei, who had aligned himself with Kokabile. Anyway, Issei and Kiba had been utterly defeated by the female exorcists, who left shortly afterwards with the sexy nun, Griselda, who seemed disappointed with how the girls behaved. Soon after Kiba himself disappeared, despite Rias who explicitly told him not to go after them. While Issei may have been slow on the uptake, he felt that situation was getting out of hand and the way Kiba was approaching this was not safe or normal. Thus, after school he decided to meet up with the exorcists while roping in Kaneko and Saji along. He proposed a plan where they could achieve both their goals. Issei and his side would destroy the shards while the exorcists could take back their shards home. It would be beneficial for both sides as Kiba could gain a measure of peace and the girls would complete their mission. Zenobia on her part agreed with his plan on the condition that Griselda did not know of it since she would object to it. Kiba, who came later, took a fair bit of convincing to agree work with the girls, but he too came along as he would get the chance to destroy the holy sword. Issei had once thought of asking Flynn for help but decided against it. The guy would most likely brush them off and do it by himself. There was also the strong possibility that Zenobia, from what he's seen so far, would probably antagonize the guy, that Flynn might just kill her. Plus, Issei had a hard time looking at the guy after what he did to Ria's brother. Issei still remembered the shock, horror and anger on Ria's beautiful face, and that made Issei upset as it happened right after she had been freed from her engagement. The fact that both they and Sona's peerage were ordered to watch him also made things difficult to be around Flynn. He did suggest that they ask Kaniko's sexy older sister to help, but the first year turned down that idea. The first part being that Kaniko knew that Issei just wanted a chance to look at Kuroka's breast. And the second was because Kuroka's status as a stray had not been fully lifted yet. If she were seen by the two young exorcists, they, especially Zenobia, might try to kill her or worse think the devils were turning against them. As it was, it just the four of them plus Irina and Zenobia. The next day they started trying to find those thieves around town, but it was quite a hassle considering Zenobia and Irina began wandering off on their own while Kiba butted heads with them over some of the more trivial matters. As the hours went by, it almost looked like they would come to blows. But as the sun began to set, the bad guys decided to ambush them, and they ended up fighting for their lives while near residential areas. Well, rather, it was a single person that ambushed them. Fried Selzen, the rogue exorcist who had first been an underling of Rainier and nearly killed Issei during the latter's first few days as a devil. Kiba had reported that he was already confronted by him. But perhaps he did not see that the maniac was different. Primarily, Fried now had prosthetic arms made out of metal. And then there was the sword he was wielding. It gave off a powerful holy aura, just like the swords that Zenobia and Irina wielded, so it had to be another Excalibur shard. But what was worse was that it made Fried superfast, even faster than Kiba, who was empowered by his night piece. And so now the group was chasing after Fried, with only the exorcists and Kiba able to keep up with him and his newfound speed. Yahahahaha. Oh man. I always knew I was popular. Fried exclaimed with insane glee as he parried another swing from Kiba, followed by dodging Zenovia's downstrike. Don't worry. I'll cut you all up with my sweet Excalibur rapidly. Be silent, heretic, and face God's wrath. Zenobia declared as she swung her sword again. Fried easily dodged it, thus Excalibur destruction destroyed a section of the ground. Fried then countered with his own sword strike but had to pull back when Kiba lunged at him with Holy Eraser. Kiba growled as their blades clashed. Holy Eraser started absorbing some of Rapidly's holy energy. Tell me where Valper is? The knight demanded. Ah. I really hate that sword of yours, shitty devil. Fried cursed as he kicked Kiba in the stomach. The force sent the knight crashing into Zenobia, sending them both in the ground. Fried then switched his attention to Irina. But was unprepared when Irina changed Excalibur Mimic's form into a whip. With a strong flex of the wrist, she wrapped the rope around Rapidly, stopping Fried's attack. Irina smiled. Aha! Got you! She cheered. Her victory was cut short when Fried kicked her in the stomach, causing her to lose her grip. Like that will work, what the fuck? Fried shouted as something blue wrapped around his leg. Gotcha, asshole. Saji shouted. The blue line could be traced to a small black bracer in the form of a small black chameleon-like lizard on his left hand coming from the lizard's mouth. You can't move anymore now that absorption line has you. Whoa! Nice going, Saji. Issei complimented as the two boys and Kaniko had finally caught up. Fuck. Is this thing absorbing my strength? Fried yelled as he tried to break free but with no success. Now I got you! Exclaimed Kiba as he lunged at Fried. The stray exorcist managed to block the knight's strike and force him back. That gave Fried an open window to reveal a hidden gun in his left prosthetic arm. Taking aim, he fired several shots at Saji. The pawn had little time to react as several bullets pierced his left shoulder. Arg! Saji yelled in pain. His sacred gear disappeared and Fried was able to move again. Before anyone could react, the crazy stray exorcist disappeared. What the? Where'd he go? Issei shouted as he and the others looked around for Fried. Zenobia got up. He must be using Excalibur transparency. Probably carrying it with him. Suddenly a large gash formed on Irina's back, causing the girl to scream. Irina! Zenobia and Issei yelled in horror as they watched said exorcist fall to the ground. Fried reappeared beside her, his new sword covered in blood. Woohoo, one down. Fried said as he kicked Irina in the stomach and sent her crashing into a tree. The force knocked Excalibur Mimic out of her hands and allowed Fried to pick it up. That makes 4. Damn it. First with the sword that makes him super fast, then one that turns him invisible, and there's the fact that he has guns in his arms. This is messed up. Issei cursed. Less talking, more beating up. Kaneko said as she threw a tree at Fried. The stray exorcist cackled as he easily sidestepped the projectile. He then focused on blocking Kiba's attack with Excalibur Mimic, having turned the sword into a shield. Revealing his hidden gun in his left arm, he fired at Kiba, forcing the knight back. With him out of the way, Fried revealed a similar gun in his right arm. Ha ha ha. It's a bullet free for all. The devils immediately dove for cover, not wanting to get by holy bullets. Irina managed to get behind the log that Kaneko had thrown while Zenobia used Excalibur Destruction as a shield. That gave Fried an opening to attack. Immediately putting away the guns, he took out Excalibur rapidly and charged at her. Zenobia only realized a second too late as Fried was already upon her. Clang! Instead of striking Zenobia, Fried's sword instead clashed with Excalibur Blessing. Griselda frowned as she pushed Fried back, getting into a stance while standing between him and Zenobia. "Gee Griselda," said blue-haired girl exclaimed, surprised to see her guardian here. Fried leered at the newcomer. "Ho, looks like another has joined. And a sexy one at that. I really am a fucking babe magnet," he said as he recognized Griselda. "I see your mouth is as foul as ever," Griselda commented while getting ready to fight. Fried also looked ready to resume, until a small magic circle appeared next to his ear. His expression became one of surprise, which then turned to anger before relenting. "TCH. You fuckers got lucky. Next time I'm going to chop you all up into shitty pieces," Fried said as he reached into his pocket. That made Kiba snapped as he rushed towards Fried. "I won't let you escape. Not until you tell me where Valper Galliel is. Later fuckers," Fried said as he activated the flashbang. Everyone shielded their eyes as the sudden light blinded them. When it died down, Fried was gone, taking Excalibur Mimic with him. "Ah, shit." Issei cursed. "He escaped and took one of the shards too. He couldn't have gotten far. We can catch up with him if we move," Kiba shouted, his voice holding barely restrained malice. The look in his eyes showed that he would not stop hunting Fried until he got what he wanted. Before he could, however, Tiamat appeared from the sky. Wings still out, she grabbed the furious knight by the wrist and stopped him from running. Kiba was so angry that he tried to take a swing at Tiamat with his sword, only for the dragon to knock it out of his hand with a mere slap. She then threw the boy to the ground and pinned him with her foot on his back. "No one is going anywhere until we know what's happening here," Tiamat said, leaving no room for arguments. "Lady Tiamat is correct," Griselda said as she sheathed her sword. "Zenobia, go and see to Irina. After that, you two will have a lot of explaining to do." She ended her sentence with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Zenobia shuddered before nodding quickly. "We would also like to know too," a third person said. Issei flinched at the familiar voice. Coming out of a magic circle were Rias and Sona, their queens right behind them. Neither heiresses looked happy. And Issei didn't need to be a genius to know that he was in big, big trouble. And that is all. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share and support the original writer. See you on the next video.